Hello and welcome to Superpower Broadcasting. Tonight is the 10th of March, 2020, and we have had a series of primaries all happening tonight. And Based Biden has prevailed. It is remarkable, really. It's the sort of thing that if we take a step back and look at how the election played out, for example, just a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, with some of the early primaries, Biden was in, fourth place, third place, fifth place, here and there. And now today, it is clear that Bernie has no viable path to the nomination. You can say to me, of course, well, Kevin, Bernie only has, 100-point gap. He can close it. He's got, 80% the delegates that Biden has. But I would say to you, no, that's foolish reasoning. And there are 2 points for that. The first is that California was his big claim, his big vestige of popularity, and less than a third of Democrats in California voted for him there. He narrowly beat out Biden. It was about a 7-point difference or so. But you have to consider the fact that the moderates were split. The moderates were split about 4 different ways. And this is the case because Bloomberg was also running. And even though Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar had suspended their campaigns in the hours and couple of days prior to the Super Tuesday primaries, they still received about 7% of the vote. Now, some of that was surely diehard supporters that were going to write them in regardless, but some of them were probably people who, they were casual fans of Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg. And they go in the voting booth. They don't know that they've suspended their campaign. They see their name there on the ballot because everybody's name is there on the ballot still. Because if you suspend your campaign, you still show up on the ballot and people voted for them. Even in that circumstance, Biden narrowly, he almost did it. And so we have to take a step back here and say, yes, Biden won big on Super Tuesday. He could have won quite a bit bigger if the moderates had been united. Tonight, the moderates are united, and it's clear. It's clear without question. Biden won huge, and that leads me to my second point. And for those of you wondering, Reese should be here shortly. He will roll in, of his own accord when he has the time available. He'll be here shortly, though. And so you can expect to see Nightmare Fuel here soon. Thank you for tuning in to the viewers that are with us currently. This leads me to my second point, which is that the progressives, the TYT army, the Kremlin Kyles, the neckbeard Jimmies, all of the lefties that had been backing Breadline Bernie, they had made the argument that, well, sure, Biden can win Texas or the South, but when it comes down to the Rust Belt, well, Bernie's going to win big there because he's a left populist. He's a populist. He's gonna kill it with all the working class voters that are sick of NAFTA. They're sick of what Bernie calls neoliberalism, all this sort of stuff. They're gonna vote for Bernie, and that it's really a contest there between Trump's brand of right wing populism versus Bernie's brand of left wing populism. And it turned out, of course, no, that was patently incorrect. That was false reasoning. That's what happens when you live in an echo chamber. The fact of the matter is that those disaffected Rust Belt voters, they're sick of populism on both sides because they see what it is, right? It's a culty type figure taking advantage of their own misfortune to brand themselves as this faux champion and their hero. Now, if it came down to it, they would side with Trump over Bernie for sure, because Bernie is, he's a socialist. He's seen as this, radical elite, all this sort of thing. Whereas Bernie, or rather Trump, is seen as this, sure, he's a billionaire, but he's our guy. He's this guy who's on the inside and he's going to fight for us and everything. And they can point to how he's disliked by other billionaires in New York, where he came from, that sort of stuff. But the thing is, when it comes to the issue of Bernie, Bernie's, like I said, his last claim to fame here was that altogether he was going to win big because those people in the Rust Belt were just there. They were done with it. They were done, and they didn't like Hillary Clinton, so they weren't going to like Biden because they're both moderates. And it turns out, no, actually, Biden is a uniting candidate, and Biden can bring together a diverse coalition of people, including some very wealthy people as well as a lot of working class people who they don't want government handouts. They don't want some big nationalized bureaucracy to be this sort of crux on which they place their future and become indentured to the government. They're not interested in that. They want somebody like Biden. And in fact, they would choose somebody like Trump as well over somebody like Bernie, because Trump's brand of populism, it anoints and acknowledges the agency of those in the Rust Belt. Biden's brand of pragmatism is honest. It's upfront. Biden has said on numerous occasions, hey, look, I'm not going to make you a bunch of promises that I'm not going to keep. And of course, disenfranchised people are like, well, we'll take the honest person there. In the case of Trump, of course, we need to remember that when it comes down to it, his whole brand of populism here was that it's based on the idea that, we're going to get jobs back, we're going to do all this sort of stuff, and you're going to have your life the way it used to be. Whereas Bernie's vision is, bread lines. Basically, it's, you can queue up for the welfare checks, and that's it. And the government is your new source of income, essentially, and that's it. And that's going to make everything better. And these people, by and large, are like, well, no, we have agency. We used to be financially independent. We still want to be financially independent. That sort of stuff. They looked at Trump. They also here clearly look to Biden. And so, what's funny about this is that Kremlin Kyle Kulinski, Cenk Uygur, as I call him, Junk Cenk, all these people, they had said, if you have a left wing populist against a right wing populist, the left wing populist is obviously going to crush it because, I guess, left good or whatever reasoning. The problem here is that of course, when we look at this situation, is that for them, it's a good thing for my side, is that it turns out that a moderate on the left has a better chance and appeals to more people than a radical populist on the left like Bernie does. And so in terms of popularity, I'm not saying that Biden would win those states against Trump. I'm not saying it. And Reese is here in the studio. I will add him shortly. I'm just going to conclude these remarks, and then we can get into Reese's analysis. To conclude what I was saying, though, I'm not saying that Biden would beat Trump in, say, Michigan, though I think it's probably likely. I have him at a 65% chance of victory right now if it were Biden versus Trump in the general election. However, I believe that in order of who would win over those voters, it's either going to be, a pragmatist like Biden or a right-wing populist. And then way, way down below, you have left-wing populism. In other words, socialism and whatnot has no appeal to these people. And sure, you can whine, the progressives can whine and say, well, that's my false consciousness, or they're low information voters or whatever. Yeah, you're not going to win anybody over by that. You're just come across as an ivory tower elitist who reads his Marx and sits there, having your parents pay your $40,000 a year tuition at some elitist school or whatever. I mean, you're not winning over anybody there. You can say that Trump's fake, sure, but he looks a lot more real than you guys. And Biden, as I said, is honest and says, I'm not going to make you these unfounded promises that I know that I can't keep. And people respect that. So we have now the Prince of Warmongers, Reese the Based of Nightmare Fuel. Welcome.
Thank you. Hopefully I'm coming through okay, because I think our connection's a little lackluster, but it should be okay.
A little lackluster, kind of like lackluster Lauren Southern, but she's kind of old news now.
Yeah, that's a name I haven't heard in a very long time.
Yeah, lackluster Lauren.
Yeah, no one cares about her. Okay, but you can hear me right. You can hear me all right, Kevin?
I can hear you all right. However, I do notice, especially when you came in, there was a slight tone change, as if there's a bit of a delay, or not necessarily a delay in the signal, but it wasn't coming through as clearly. Now it seems fine though.
Yeah. Okay. No, I see what you're saying. It's better now. Let me just say, right off the bat, this has been 2 weeks worth of winning in my
Big
mind.
win, big
Lots
win.
lots of winning. I had a
Fat
good
Cub.
feeling about tonight. Regardless, I thought tonight was going to go well, but tonight went really well. Tonight went absurdly well. Um, I mean, like, what can you even say? There's still a couple results coming in, because I remember when we did this last time, all the results had pretty much come in,
Yeah,
except for California, which still hasn't really come in all the way because California is kind of a weird state like that. It's
yeah.
really big, and there's a lot to take into account. The states
It's
that we
bigger than
are,
Canada.
yes,
Like
that's
like
very
there are
true.
more people in California than there are in the country of Canada, right? It takes a long time to count that stuff.
Oh no, for sure. The states that we are waiting on are North Dakota, which is the state with the least delegates tonight. I believe around 20-ish, and it is not really all that important. Bernie's leading there, even though Biden has a sizable chunk. It doesn't really matter. And the other state, which is the very contested Washington,
Washington.
which should have been, you would think, uh, given because they were hyping up Bernie's win in California. He won
Yeah.
California. He's, there's a lot of very left wing people on the West Coast. Joe Biden and Bernie are currently tied in Washington. It could go either way. Now imagine the story. Joe Biden wins Washington. Bernie
uh,
wins one state, and it's North Dakota.
uh, I mean, his whole claim to fame, their whole argument after Super Tuesday was, he's going to win over the Rust Belt. That was what they were staking their competitiveness on. Because even if Bernie won by 10 points in Washington, it's not impressive. That's not going to get him to 1,900 delegates. He needed the legitimacy that comes from winning the Rust Belt, because though that was his campaign's talking point against Trump, was that it will win big there and then we can beat Trump big there. He couldn't even beat a moderate Democrat there. How is he going to beat a populist Republican? He'd get crushed against Trump. So, but of course, it looks like that will not be a worry that anybody has to consider, because he can't even win Washington. I mean, that's hilarious. As you know, that's huge. That's huge to put into perspective for people. The West Coast in particular is a deeply progressive sort of thing. It's to the extent that there are suburbs in the West Coast that are progressive. Now Biden, of course, is still winning with the suburbs, but there's a chance that he narrows out a victory in some of the urban areas too, which is pretty impressive. So
There was the other state, because obviously the three M's came into play first. So we had Mississippi, Missouri, and Michigan. Missouri, it was, people were kind of on the fence about it, but it went to Biden. Obviously, Mississippi was a no-brainer for Biden.
yeah,
Michigan was the big contentious state of the night, and Biden took it. he took it pretty handily, and that
huge.
was the one that Bernie really needed to win if he wanted to turn this around. People
Yeah,
could say that Super Tuesday, it is more important because there's obviously more states involved. There's more delegates. California and Texas were involved. But this tonight was really the death blow. You could feel the energy leave the Bernie Sanders campaign. You could absolutely feel it just go away. They all of the progressives online, they have turned on Bernie pretty much, or they've remained silent. They're not saying
yeah.
anything. The
Even
progressive voice,
Josh. Yeah, even
vouched.
Bosch has
He
said
turned
that
on
Bernie
him.
will never be president.
Well, that's the first correct thing he's ever said.
That's true.
The Progressive Voice turned on Bernie, was basically bitching about Bernie's campaign and his tactics. I mean, like they have no principles, they have no sense of loyalty. Michael Tracy was even shitting on the Sanders campaign.
Uh,
Um,
I mean, it's the sort of thing that, I can see now. Obviously, Bernie's the cult leader. They're not going to necessarily blame Bernie personally, but I would really appreciate it if these people would scapegoat Linda Sarsour and stuff, because of course Bernie's responsible for choosing them. But if they could at least recognize that the surrogates around Bernie are toxic, that's enough right there, because these people are crazy as is. Because
you know,
they won't blame Bernie, but at least now maybe they'll see the people around him for what they are, which is just toxic crap. So
I think that they've already done that to a degree. It was kind of a way of appearing to be objective, appearing like they're criticizing the Sanders campaign without directly criticizing Bernie. Linda Sarsour is a pretty obvious example, and Rashida Tlaib as well. But no, tonight they were very much railing against Bernie personally, and it was kind of surreal to see. I almost felt a little bad for Bernie but at the same time, all you can really say is you throw your arms up and you shrug and you look at him and say, look, man, you put this movement together, this movement that was built on the backs of terrible people. It was always fueled by their angry, passionate vindictiveness. And this is just what happens. This is absolutely what happens. I am not shocked in the slightest that it was going to implode at some point, but it still is a bit surreal to see the cult turn on the master when the second things appear to be going south. It was a sign to me that the campaign was over.
Reese, I must stop you for a moment there. Nothing in the Bernie campaign was going south. He got crushed in the south.
Oh yeah, no, they're so done. Do you actually have a delegate count handy? Let's
I'll get that. Last I saw, they had a 97 point or 97 delegate differential, but that was about an hour ago. So it's likely 3 digits now.
It's remained pretty consistent. And tonight, Bernie he was counting on more delegates in Michigan and more delegates in Washington to close the gap, maybe even gain a lead temporarily, but it's not happening. And going, oh yeah, go ahead.
I do have the data. I do have the data here just so that we have 11 viewers with us right now. I just want you guys to be informed right now so you can appreciate, what we're saying in the context of what's happening. This is according to the New York Times.
Okay.
They have been kind of conservative in allocating delegates, and yet we have a clear differential here. This is pretty remarkable. Biden currently has 1.77 million votes from tonight, with a delegate gain of 153 delegates thus far. Bernie, in contrast, has 1.2 million votes. So almost 500,000 votes, or actually over 500,000 votes fewer. And he's picked up 89 delegates tonight. The total delegate count stands at 823 delegates for base Biden and 663 delegates for Breadline Bernie. So that's a difference there of about 160 now. So coming up on the 200s in terms of the differential, which is insane, because Biden was like in 5th place just a few weeks ago. Joe Mentum, 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just briefly estimated. So
there was a delay in the connection there. If you could repeat your last statement, please.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now, Kevin?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I got the gist of what you were saying. Yeah, that's crazy. I wasn't track of the delegates, but that's Biden doubling the gap between them tonight, and Bernie needed to close the gap. That was really his
Yes.
only chance of making a comeback, and that is representative. This needs to be over. There's no recognition. I'll say this. This was nothing. Next week, if Bernie even lasts till next week, next week we have Georgia. That's going to Biden. Florida.
Biden.
That's so going to Biden. Illinois. Yeah, I wonder who that's going to.
Biden.
That's going to Biden.
Biden.
And what's the other one? Fuck, I just had it. What is the other one? It was another one that actually might have gone to Bernie. Think so.
It was probably
I'm sorry. I'm so
little states.
I'm so unprepared. Okay. It's Ohio. And that's probably going to Biden. Arizona.
Oh yeah.
Arizona's probably going to Biden too.
Biden.
See, a lot of them were. I wasn't expecting a tie or the tied result we're seeing in Washington now, but I was actually, the other thing is I was a little surprised that Biden took Idaho, because Bernie has been taking a lot of the states over in this region. He obviously took Nevada and he took Utah. And I don't know, I thought, and Colorado. So Bernie was kind of forging a little stronghold out here in the, Western Midwest area. And I thought that for sure he might take Idaho, but he didn't. That was a shock to me. It's just yet another state to add to Biden's pile.
I mean, Bernie got routed tonight, and the thing is, if Bernie is smart, and if Bernie were genuine about actually wanting to defeat Trump in November, he would drop out in the coming days and endorse Biden immediately. That way, we can get over with the divisive primaries, and Biden can just focus on running attack ads against Trump, and that's what needs to happen. Otherwise, he's only hurting the party at this point with a 0% chance. I mean, there is a higher chance now. I forget who it was. It may have been Real Clear Politics. They have Biden with a 99.9% chance of winning the nomination. Then they have a 0.1% chance of a contestative convention, and then Bernie's at 0% for getting the nomination. So Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie are tied currently in that respect, which is hilarious. And there is a great stat that I saw tonight on CNN, and it was from a few hours ago. So it's likely increased the uphill battle on Bernie's end, which was the percent of delegates needed going forward in order to secure the nomination. At that point, Biden needed to win 50.2% of all the delegates going forward. Bernie needed to win 54% of all the delegates going forward. So after tonight, Bernie's probably going to need to win like 58%, 60% of the delegates going forward to get to 1919 or whatever. It's not happening. He has no chance. That's like the dude who fails the first midterm and then says, "Yeah, but if I get 98% on the final, I can pass the course." It's like, "Yeah, buddy, you're not passing the course." Like, I mean,
you're not getting a 98% on the final. If you didn't,
you're not getting a 98. That's the thing. It's like, well, technically, I could pass the course. I could get 98. It's like, yeah, but you just flunked the midterm. How do you expect to get a 98 on the final? It's like that with Bernie. His easy states, the midterm in this example, of course, were Michigan and California. All the states going on from now were already natural Biden vestiges of support. Bernie's done. Like he's done. He's done. And I was expecting more whining and crying from the progressives tonight, but all that I saw was solemnness, and I saw this recognition that they had in some way come to terms with the fact that their cult leader will never be in power. That the closest that he's ever going to have come to power in his career was giving radical remarks and getting some big margins in 2016. But if you look at his margins tonight and compare to how he did in 2016, they're way down. They're way down. He won margins, like he had impressive victories in 2016 and he still lost. He hasn't had any. California was unimpressive. New Hampshire was unimpressive. Well, New Hampshire was decently
Mhm.
impressive, but that state is so in his favor that it's like, it's kind of like saying, Biden won Alabama by 50 points or whatever. It's like, yeah, of course. Like that wasn't up for debate. I think, I went to the Young Turks right before this stream to try to see if I could find any clips of Junk Jank whining and crying, but I was not able to. They haven't uploaded anything tonight. Maybe I missed it, but I think that they probably realized that it was going to be a routing on their end, and they didn't want to have memes available for us to use. So
Well, that's maybe they're wising up finally. Gives us less content, unfortunately. There's a couple things of note. Speaking of endorsements, there was another big story that happened tonight. I don't know if you spoke about it, but Joe Biden acquired himself.
We have lost Reese in terms of the connection. He shall be back momentarily. However, I think it's just a technical problem with the network. Yeah. So to kind of pick up where I was saying, of course, the margins of victory that Bernie has had in states that he's won are unimpressive. The margins where Biden has won are incredibly impressive. And this talking point of, oh well, Biden never won a primary before this election cycle. It's like, yeah, and he's going to win this election cycle. So that's a moot talking point. But to go with Jelly Jelly here, the based eagle profile. That's based. That's hawk pilled right there. That's neocon pilled right there. Indeed, I thought there would be more salt. I concur with that. I have Reese. He's back here. We will add him to the stream.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. It just I don't know. It just dropped me. But
Oh yeah, it's all good.
so I was saying that before that speaking of endorsements, Joe Biden acquired a very coveted endorsement tonight. That being of Andrew Yang. That
Yes.
is one of the most insane things to happen during this entire election cycle. Andrew Yang, what it means, just in case people are confused as to the significance of this, what this means, and Yang said it straight up, it means that he's foreseeing, based on the available, Biden is the obvious nominee. Andrew Yang very famously wouldn't endorse Bernie because Bernie wasn't in favor of universal basic income. Now, Biden hasn't really talked about it either, but
True.
this is what makes it kind of funny. It was very much salt in the wound for the progressives tonight, and they were out in force disowning Yang, trying to excommunicate him, cancel him, and Yang
Yang's canceled.
he, you're not his supporters. You're and they're really different camp, really. So that's significant. That's a significant endorsement because what it means is that progressives have endorsed Biden. Biden has united the party in a way that Bernie never.
Yeah, never could. The
So
connection's a bit
that's a big
spotty,
story.
a bit spotty on your end, Reese, but we will. Yeah, the connection's a bit intermittent with respect to.
That's fair.
Okay, I can hear you now. Does Reese
The Yang
have
Gang, the memes
Ayatollah
were so
tier?
much fun.
Does Reese have Ayatollah tier internet now?
Does Reese have Ayatollah
Yeah,
tier
yeah.
internet now? Yes. I've
Oh,
got
you're back. You're
coronavirus
back. You're
internet.
back. I can hear you clearly now.
There we go.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh
The
man.
jokes about my internet are never going to cease. That's fine. Hey, Patreon me and I'll get better internet. How about that?
Yeah, guys, go to Reese's Patreon. There have been there has been a grifty movement by the neolibs over on Globe/Sock/Rose Twitter recently to try to give Nutso Liz money by, as they call themselves, the Thimp Army. If these people are wasting their money on a futile and vapid edgelord such as herself, we can rally around and support Reese here and actually put money to good use because Reese makes base content. So
Yeah, that I don't even want to talk about that saga. That's so sad and pathetic. I don't even have words for it, honestly. And anyone who's given that chick money, she said that you are morons pretty much for giving her money. There's no reason to give her money.
She called them degenerates. She also has had over 100 people that she's blocked and is told that for the low price of $8 United States currency, she will unblock them, and some of them have done so. And so I won't get into it, of course. I won't get into it, but I think it is an interesting tactic, of course, to block your own supporters and then to blackmail them to be unbanned by trying to get $8 a piece. Like, that's like, as far as Patreon and grifting goes, that's kind of like the Hamas of grifting, where you use your own side as a shield, that sort of thing.
Pretty much. That's female privilege in action right there. We could never get away with doing anything like that. Would never work. But we don't need to talk about it.
We don't need to talk about that right now. I'm gonna have a stream in the coming days at some point on. It's gonna just be titled, getting canceled by Globe/Rose Twitter, Globe Rose Twitter, and because
hey, don't forget about the socks.
Oh yeah, well, and the socks too. And it's funny because Reese, you had mentioned something that really kind of stood out to me, and I kind of chuckled about a few times throughout the last few days, which was that, isn't it kind of a sad indictment of the era of cringe in which we're living, that we can just automatically in our mind translate what all these stupid emojis mean and stuff in all their bios?
I made a joke that it was like reading hike. There's going to be people in the future like trying to trans emoji messages, and like I feel dirty for knowing what any of them mean. I'm deeply ashamed.
I mean, and also their whole parlance is basically taken from like 8chan and 4chan and stuff. It's incel tier memes at this point. That's all that they have. They don't have any principles left. They abandon any sort of market reform principles that they used to have with neoliberals. Like, I'm convinced at this point, like Milton Friedman, Reagan, all those guys that they originally said, oh yeah, well, they were neolibs, they would all think that they're cringe. So that's my view, but we can move on.
Yeah, Liz, one last thing about that. Liz told me that she is not a neoliberal. She just said, I'm a liberal, I just happen to hang out with neoliberals. So I don't even know what to make of that, honestly.
She has called me both a conservative and a liberal and said I can't even right now over it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the liberal neocon. Like, I'm socially liberal, economically pretty right wing. I'm a hawk. Like, the labels, like, oh, if you're liberal, you have to be for all this stuff. It's like, at the end of the day, American conservatism, by and large, with the exception of some fringe movements, and American liberalism are both liberal in the sense of what liberalism means over the last 400 years, right? So,
Mhm.
you know,
It's funny
like,
because I was confronting her. She was talking some shit about you, and then I confronted her and I said, I was the one who first posited the idea that there are many people in the neoliberal community who are unprincipled, contrarian edgelords who are here to waste everyone's time. And that was, what her response was to that?
canceled.
She,
You're canceled.
no, her response, she didn't even bother to defend herself. She just said, "Well, I'm not a neoliberal."
Oh man, what a convenient cop out. Because at a minimum, she's got about 3,800 people that are following her right now because they see her as like the queen of the neolibs. And I said in a chat earlier, and I've said to a few people, and it's disappointing because I've spoken about this on numerous occasions on this channel. But in terms of the people that I would cite as inspirations for the direction that my channel went, I've cited you. And I've cited Bill Kristol. I always thought, I kind of wanted to do like a Zoomy version of conversations with Bill Kristol, like a bit less dry academics and stuff and more, and those people are cool, but they don't really have too much of a reach outside of the Washington circles. But now that I know that Bill Kristol follows her, every time I see conversations with Bill Kristol, no matter what the subject is, I'm like, how the hell is this guy following Not So Liz? Like, that's cringe.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what's going through his head, honestly.
I mean,
It's a cringe move, Bill. Come on.
his show is so serious and so well informed, and he has such great guests on, and makes really, really good points about how multipolarity is actually unstable, how America is this bastion of freedom and everything. But then you go on his social media on Twitter, and it's basically he likes cringe stuff as long as it's anti-Trump that he wouldn't have probably even he would have said was cringe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's weird what the Never Trump movement has become, in my view. And this is coming from somebody who calls himself a neocon. Like, you'd think I'd be more open to the Never Trump thing, but let's keep it real. Trump has made some right calls that if Bernie were in power would not have happened. So
Yeah, no. And the thing is, I've seen your takes about that, and I don't disagree. I think that it really upsets a lot of people.
yeah.
But and I can't tell you what I would do for sure in any given situation. If I would vote for X candidate, if I would stay home. Um it really does depend. It really depends on what's happening on, I have other issues to take into account, but you know, I could maybe put up with a Warren. I don't think I'd ever vote for her, but
Yeah.
I don't think I'd actively vote against her. I would not put up with Bernie though.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
not put up with Bernie one bit. Now, thankfully, that is not even something I need to consider at this point. So we will move off this topic real quick, and we will get back to what really should be the main theme of the night, is what I would like to call the failed political career of one Bernard Sanders. Because what a journey it's been, really. This
40
is
years.
it.
40 years.
Yep. This is probably the last time he's going to run for president. And he's not going to get, not only is he not going to win, he's not going to get the nomination again. And it is ceaselessly amazing to me that there is an entire political movement that is basically erected itself as an honorary statue to this guy who has never accomplished anything. It really is a fitting metaphor because it's a bunch of keyboard warriors bitching and moaning and doing nothing. They're unable to make compromises. They're unable to make real progress. People who actually have made real progress over the years sacrificed a lot to make that progress.
Oh, and we've lost the connection with Reese again. I anticipate that he'll be back shortly. When he is, he's welcome to continue. Of course, I'm just going to speak in the meantime. Yeah, to kind of touch on what Reese is talking about, we have here somebody who is ultimately touted over the and positioned for 40 years as this anti-establishment kind of candidate he's on the outside and he will change everything. And yet, what do we see? His entire wealth and everything is amassed on a career as a government, basically a government bureaucrat sitting, well, not a bureaucrat, but an elected official who never really got anything done, taking up space and air in the Senate. And at the end of the day, of course, even if by some miracle he did become president, none of his agenda would be fulfilled, because even if there was a blue House and a blue Senate, it would mostly be moderates, and they would never vote for his borderline socialist agenda. You can call it whatever you want. He calls it democratic socialist. It doesn't matter. Even if the Democrats had all of the White House, the House, and the Senate, he still wouldn't get it through. And of course, if he were president this cycle, he'd be up against the Republican House and Senate. So nothing would get done. In other words, it's a joke. Even if the Burners got everything they wanted and he became president, none of their agenda would pass. And that's of course Trump would win if he got the nomination, but I believe Reese is back now. So
yes, sorry
if you're there, Reese. Okay,
yeah. The Russians are trying to shut me down very clearly. It's not just my fault. Somebody else.
Bernie's their guy. Bernie's their guy.
Oh yeah, the Russians don't like me talking shit about Bernie. I understand. Uh-oh.
Oh man, Anthony's here. He's in Michigan. He's saying that he drove people out today in Michigan. Anthony is part of this historic and crushing defeat of the whiners and criers, the progressives, the TYT army. It is based. Big up Anthony.
Anthony is a legend. Anyone who went out and voted, today or last week or in South Carolina, thank you, really, because you made all the difference. This wouldn't have been possible if people didn't get out and vote. And a lot of them aren't here. A lot of them aren't on social media at all. A lot of them are just normal people out there in the world who
real people.
They're not interested. They're not interested in the socialist agenda. They're just not. It's not appealing to them in any way, shape, or form. And that's
good. Reese, it's pretty great because I was expecting the SALT to eventually morph into, once they realize that Bernie's crushed and defeated, morph into, well, we're done with democracy. Let's do a full-on revolution. Let's do it like Lenin did, sort of thing. But I haven't really seen that tonight. All that I've seen is this moroseness and this despair and this utter horror on the part of the haters and traitors, and it is immensely satisfying to me.
I wouldn't be too worried about that. Consider that this would be a revolution done by a bunch of people who look like Vaush. Like,
yeah,
it's not like Castro doing a revolution. Castro is a strapping young lad. These people who post their guillotine gifs, they're a bunch of fucking losers. They're not going to do a fucking revolution.
Yeah.
It reminds me of people who are in like right-wing militias who say they're going to fight the government. You're not going to do shit. And it's about as like serious of a threat. No. They talked a big game, but they got slapped down in the last couple weeks, and they got told to shut the fuck up. Just like Biden did Biden said at his recent rally, which a bunch of Bernie bro children were attempting to interrupt with inane chanting. Did you see that clip of those protesters at Biden's rally?
I did not. I've been so out of the loop and busy with work that it's kind of a minor miracle that I've managed to pull off this stream tonight. But
I'll tell you, It was okay. So it was the other day, and they come to his rally. They're trying to chant over him speaking very disrespectfully. They're chanting that they want the Green New Deal, and Biden kind of made a reference to him like, "Oh, here comes the Bernie Bros. Don't worry, folks. Don't let them go. It's not we're not doing a Trump rally here." That's what he said to him. It was pretty funny.
Oh man,
That's
these
just kind of how he treated him. He was like, "Oh, here's the Bernie Bros." And then Bernie Bro
Bros.
Twitter, it exploded in a fiery passion. They were like, "Oh my God." There was this one guy, he was like, he's some like communist sympathizer, and he was like, "This is the Democratic Party telling an entire generation to go fuck themselves."
13%, 13% of millennials voted for Bernie in Super Tuesday, if I recall.
Mm-hmm.
13%, an entire generation, 13%. No wonder these people haven't dropped out yet. No wonder he hasn't dropped out yet. They can't do math. Andrew Yang can do math. His campaign slogan was #math. Like, I mean, he can do the math. Apparently, the socialists, they can't do the math. Is that really surprising? They've tanked every economy, literally. I mean, they're like, oh, demand is for gum and cleaning supplies. Let's produce tanks, bro. Like that's all that they know how to do. All they know how to do is tank an economy, literally. Oh, Reese has cut out again. He should likely be back shortly, of course. Thank you to the 15 viewers who are with us still. I appreciate your patience with these connection issues. We'll let Reese talk once he gets back because he was in the midst of making an interesting point here. We have we got some activity in the chat. It's good to see. Like to see an active chat. We saw tonight, of course, with all these people, the burners, the Bernie Bros, they had a really super fringe TikTok go viral recently by this overrated girl that I guess a lot of people find very attractive. I kind of found her to be kind of mediocre myself or whatever. I mean, I don't care about your attractiveness or whatever, but if you're going to stake your claim to fame on your looks or whatever, you better be able to bring that to the table, and they can't deliver. She did this okay boomer meme and it got like 15 million views or whatever on TikTok, and she's wearing a Bernie shirt. And then she did okay liberal and she's wearing a Karl Marx shirt, and you're like, okay, so she gets all these millions of views, and at the end of the day only 13% of millennials show up to vote for the socialists. They are not popular with young people. It turns out young people would rather have iPhones and swag and Fortnite and then bread lines and gulags and all that stuff. So yeah, Reese.
Are we good now? Sorry about that.
We are good now. So continue your point.
I'll get back to that in a minute, but I wanted to give you a little correction. So the okay boomer girl and the Karl Marx girl are actually two different people.
Wait, those are different people?
Those are different people. The Karl Marx girl was doing a parody of, but I'll tell you because I'll tell you a story. This is funny. I know that girl. I know that Karl Marx girl. Because she used to be a fan of mine back in the day.
Oh, and I've bombshell journalism here. Oh man. Okay, let's hear the deets.
Her name is Maria. She had a channel called Maria the Witch. I think she's renamed it at this point. It doesn't matter. I've spoken to her because basically back in the day I made a video against ContraPoints, and Maria was angry, so she made a video in response to me. I was watching her video on a stream. I was making fun of it, and then I brought her on and I made fun of her to her face, which was pretty funny. That was a while ago though. And then I did there's a stream, it's somewhere on my channel where I was watching a debate between her and someone else where she was defending communism and I went over it for like 2 hours, and I was just making fun of her and pointing out how she was wrong. So that's still up on my channel. If you go to my channel and search like communism, you'll probably find it. So yeah, I do know that girl. She is for real. She very much is a communist. And also, as was pointed out by a lot of people who found her doing that meme, she is also an apologist for necrophilia, very infamously. So
What?
yes, she has.
What? I
Yep.
thought that was just a meme.
No,
What?
that is very, very serious.
Oh
Yeah,
man. Oh man, is it any
she
surprise though? Wow. So she supports communism that's killed over 150 million people in 103 years now. So I guess necrophilia, I mean, I guess it's not the worst thing she supports, but
it's pretty bad when necrophilia isn't the worst thing you support.
I mean,
That's
I kind of
not a
makes sense that a communist would have necrophilia though, because the best way to get a lot of dead corpses is to try out communism. So
yeah. Then you've got plenty of new playthings that can't fight back. Very true.
yep.
Yuck. Very, very, very yuck.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes. Hashtag yikes. Hashtag fringe and cringe.
I found it
mean,
really funny to see her, back on my timeline and everyone was talking about her. That was amusing.
oh man, Reese, there's just a comment I want to highlight here. The Gun Shark says, isn't Jank, so Junk Jank, an apologist for animal loving? Of course, he's a buffalo and his wife is a human. Of course he is. Like he's married
he
to a human.
has I need to find them again, but yeah, he has made very, very unfortunate comments about bestiality. I am aware of that. And
It's
really,
just it's a treasure trove of yikes. I mean, I call these people the Bernie Bros, the Branch Bernardians, if you will. I call them the cringe lords and the yikes mongers, and that's what they are.
yikes mongers. That's a new one. I like it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's accurate, right? It's accurate. I mean, every time I see these guys, I'm like, they call me a warmonger. Okay, they're yikes mongers. Like all that they have to post is cringe and yikes.
Yeah, no. They like these are the last people who should be lecturing us on anything. I'm actually, part of me is kind of glad that, now granted there is going to be rage to come, but I'm a little, happily surprised that the Bernie Bros accepted defeat tonight rather easily. Because, accept it with some dignity is all I can say. It was going to happen. It was really inevitable. Bernie, he wasn't going to unite the party, and he wasn't going to win the presidency. There's no way.
Reese, I got to stop you. I'm not able to verify this currently. I want to be able to fact check for the audience, but if this is true, I'm highlighting the comment right now. We have Jelly, the based eagle, in the chat. He says, Jank is now begging Biden to debate Bernie on Twitter. Hashtag debate me, bro.
That doesn't surprise me, because reportedly Sam Cedar went on MSNBC today and said the same thing.
Debate me, bro. Debate me, bro.
That's their last, bastion right now. Is there's an upcoming debate on the 15th, presumably just between Bernie and Biden. I just combined them like they're one entity.
Combine them. Oh man, you know what that reminds me of? I don't believe it was a Ben Garrison drawing, because there were too few labels on it, but it was a cartoon, and it was a recent cartoon by some ultra Trump Republican, and it was Bernie and Biden both looking very old and geriatric, and they both had their canes in the one hand, and then in their other hands one was holding up the sickle and the other was holding up the hammer, implying that Bernie or Biden are both communists that will bring communism to America, which I find funny because actual socialists think that Biden is a dirty capitalist pig. So
that is so fringe. Like that was clearly made by someone who is about as far right as you could possibly be.
They're so far right, they probably think that Stalin was pretty trad-con and pilled. That's how far right they are.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
I'm trying to take a look at
real
any. Oh yeah, I'm trying to take a look if there's been any updates with the states that were in play. It looks like pretty much everything else besides North Dakota and Washington they're pretty much in completely. Those are, and the remaining 4 states went to Biden, obviously.
Biden.
Technically, Bernie is still leading in the other states, and the only one that really matters is Washington, and it is still tied. So we will
still tied.
We'll have
a tie though is a victory. Let's just bear in mind the context, because if it were a tie in Michigan, that's not a victory for anybody. It's a tie in the progressive heartland. That's a victory for Biden. Like even if they got the same number of votes exactly, that's a victory for Biden momentum wise.
Oh yeah. That's a sign that basically even with all of the odds in his favor, Bernie can't deliver.
Correct. Yeah.
We pointed this out in our Super Tuesday stream, but his victory margins weren't very impressive then. Even in Vermont, it was really not what you would expect. But I could go over. Yeah. I could go over some numbers here. They're a little interesting. So Idaho was the one that really shocked me, and Biden took that with 49%, and Bernie got 42%. For a while, it looked kind of tied up, but Biden at the end really just took it, and Bernie couldn't catch up with that. Michigan, which was the big contentious one, Biden got 53%, and Bernie got 37%.
That doesn't add up. That doesn't add up to 100. I guess is Tulsi making a comeback?
It says Bloomberg has 4%. Who is still voting for Bloomberg?
They don't know he dropped out. They don't know he dropped out and endorsed.
That's just ignorant.
Like imagine taking all that time to go to the polling booth, but not knowing he dropped out. Like you know what that reminds me of? Like this whole Twitter thing. Before you continue, I just wanted to speak on the Twitter point. They want Bernie and Biden to debate on Twitter because even if Biden makes crushing remarks that just destroy Bernie, the Bernie bros can do their little ratio, just like how the neolibs do to me, and make it look like they won. And it's like, okay, you have 1 million stupid people against 50,000 likes, but the 50,000 likes are smart people that actually show up to vote, and the 1 million burners stay home and I guess watch Vosh flip out. So
yeah, they watch TikTok girls, girls, and they simp over them. That's what they're doing instead of voting.
Yeah, and then they brag about it. They call themselves the simp army. It's like, I mean, this is some 4chan level degeneracy on their part, right? So
yeah, that's like pretty much calling yourself a cuck.
Basically, it's like, but it's a victory. No, but it's a victory because they own it. It's like, okay, that's like June calling herself a brainlet or Tulsi calling herself a fifth column. Like, okay.
Yeah, they're super lame. I'll go over a few more of these numbers. Yeah, Michigan, that's a crushing Biden victory. And a lot of the victories that we pointed out last time with Biden, a lot of them were also crushing victories.
Huge. He had a bigger margin of victory in Alabama. I've talked about this before. It's remarkable. He won in Alabama by a bigger margin. In other words, the difference between him and the second place was bigger than the absolute percent that Bernie got in his home state. So he got more than 50 points difference between him and Bernie. That's remarkable. That's not even Biden's home state. That's like, I mean, wow. That was impressive even for me, and I knew he was going to win there, right? So
I'll point out a few other numbers, and I'm going to tie this all together at the end. So another big win for Biden. Missouri, 60% for Biden,
Yes.
35% for Bernie. Very, very crushing. And also a big note that I saw a lot of the commenters saying tonight. Michigan, big black voting population, went for Biden, obviously. Same with Missouri. And the other big victory, obviously Mississippi. Mississippi was Biden's biggest win by far of the night, 81% to Bernie's 15%. Crushing, absolutely crushing. Now, here's the other ones, just to be fair. We have, and it looks like this is kind of updating a little bit. We have North Dakota, which again isn't completely done. Bernie has 49%, Biden has 39%. So that is currently Bernie's biggest lead, is 10%. Washington is tied at 33% for Sanders and Biden. I'm looking at The Guardian. It says Warren has 12%.
Wait.
That's
how is it that split? How is it that split? How are they together only getting under 70% of the vote? Like, how is 1/3 of people in that state going to vote for people who have suspended their campaigns? That's ludicrous.
Well, to be fair, it is not completely reported on.
Okay.
So that in North Dakota, North Dakota is about half counted, it looks like, and Washington is 67% reporting. So we'll see if that changes, but it's been tied in Washington pretty much as long as I've been checking it over the last couple hours, really. Now I'm going to break down a couple of these numbers that are interesting. So let's compare North Dakota, that's Bernie's biggest win, that's a 10% win, to Biden's smallest victory. Biden's smallest victory was Idaho, a state I didn't even really expect him to win, and it really looked like he wasn't going to win it, especially because it was in a region of the country that Bernie was largely taking over. So Biden has a 7% advantage there. There's a 3% difference between Biden's biggest victory, Biden's smallest victory and Bernie's biggest victory. In fact, at the moment, really Bernie's only victory.
And they're within the margin of error-ish, like, because they're not reported on yet. They could switch, like, in terms of the percent count you said for North Dakota, but
yeah, there's still a lot to be counted for that. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Biden rise up a couple more points.
That's the trend. That's the trend, is that the early ballots that are cast, in California in particular, this made a huge difference because the people who voted early voted at a time when Biden was in 5th place nationally, and they voted for Bernie. Those people, some of them would vote for Biden today just for him having a better chance of defeating Trump. And so they thought that Bernie had a better chance of defeating Trump. That was their primary voting metric. And so now we're going to see, the early ballots, the early reporting is going to favor Bernie. And then as the later votes come in, those are cast today, knowing that it's Bernie versus Biden now. It wouldn't surprise me if Bernie won, say, North Dakota by 7, and then say Biden wins Idaho by like 8 or something, But it should also be noted, and we got 16 people still with us, which is great. So thanks for being here, because you got, like I've said, you've got a lot of, legit and all that sort of stuff, big money networks out there reporting with all the data and everything. But you choose to be here with us. And we try to do a good job. We try to fact check where we don't necessarily report the numbers 100%. But here's the thing. Anthony is saying in the chat to check out the Mississippi primary. Can you go over once more just to kind of make the point to the audience? What was the margin for Biden there?
Okay. And again, Mississippi was Biden's biggest victory of the night. Biden got 81%. Bernie got 15%.
Okay, so that's a differential. That's a differential there of 66%. 66%. So the difference between Bernie's biggest lead, asterisk equals his only lead. I just want to dunk on the progressives for a moment here because we were fair and we showed the difference between Bernie's biggest lead and Biden's smallest. But I like math. I like that kind of stuff. Let's check out the difference between Bernie's biggest lead and Biden's biggest lead. That, if I can do the math properly, is 56%. So that's a
Yeah.
56% differential in terms of that's even a bigger differential than how Biden won Alabama. And that's his biggest one. That's the biggest one that we could give Bernie. We're being fair to Bernie. That's his biggest one.
Yep.
If he wins by 8 points here and 22 points there and 6 points here, we're going to give him the 22-point one to compare. Nope, we gave him the biggest 56-point difference. Amazing.
Now, technically, it's not the most delegates because the most delegates tonight were from Michigan. We're just going over percentages, but it should also be said that North Dakota, again, where Bernie has his biggest, if not only, victory, is a state with only 14 delegates. It had the least amount of delegates this time around. Now, granted, Mississippi only has 36, but that is over double of the delegates.
And it all matters. It all matters because we're dealing with a differential here. Coming out of the end of the night, it's possible that Biden will lead Bernie by over 200 delegates. So you really do, 10 delegates here, 15 delegates there does matter going forward because we're coming out to the point in this election process, this primary process, at which more than half of the delegates will have been already allocated. At which point we know that the ones that, the few that Bloomberg and Warren and those people were able to pick up, and Buttigieg, of course, are probably going to Biden at a contested convention. So,
The thing is, I'm fairly sure. In fact, I know Bernie gave a speech tonight. I will confess to not having watched it.
Same.
So if somebody in the chat watched it and they have some thoughts to share, I'm curious. I watched Joe Biden's speech and I commented about it on Twitter, and I will fully admit I did not intentionally seek out the Bernie Sanders speech because I had no interest in listening to it. Because I knew, maybe I'll go listen to it later because I'm sure it's all kinds of despair. But it was, it's going to be nothing but bitterness. It's going to be that. And it's going to it's going to be Bernie blaming, he's going to be scapegoating billionaires and all these other, boogeymen. And
the bankers, the media, all of those yikes terms that they like to use, especially like Linda Sarsour, except she's more blatant about, about naming the ethnicity that she attributes that stuff to. I have Jelly here in the chat. He says, to buttress your point about bitterness, he says, quote, 19% of Sanders voters in Michigan say they will not vote for the Democratic nominee, regardless of who it is in the election for president this November via CNN exit polls. So that's up 5 points from last. In 2016, I believe 14% of Bernie's support voted for Trump. So now 19%. The thing is, they're a smaller base than they used to be back in 2016. So it's possible that that's roughly the same number of actual voters because he doesn't have anywhere near the base that he used to. So even if he's got a higher percent that are going to vote for Trump, I think, let's say 14% of 2016 numbers, that could hurt. That could hurt Biden. But Biden has a much more diverse base than Hillary Clinton did of support. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's that was another thing a lot of people were pointing out tonight is really what gave Bernie a lot of traction last time was that there was just such a strong anti-Hillary Clinton sentiment in a lot of the country. Now, it's something I don't personally understand or co-sign. It is a reality that you just kind of have to deal with, and it's a reason why I would advocate against her running now, or really, again, as much as I like her, because unfortunately a lot of people don't. And there are some limitations that must be taken into account. But that's not happening this time around, because there is no such sentiment against Joe Biden. It couldn't possibly be compared. And we are seeing that. We are seeing that play out. Joe Biden is not nearly as disliked as Hillary Clinton, and Bernie has no chance. He had no chance of competing against him to begin with. The only time where it looked like Bernie Sanders was the front runner was when the vote was split to the point you could only win through plurality.
Yes, that's correct, and it would have gone to a contested convention at which it would have been likely that Biden would have prevailed anyway. To your original prediction from all those months ago, and I just want to get to a couple of the comments here because we have some interesting ones. First one's kind of a meme. We got Anthony in the chat. He says Bernie should drop out and endorse Tulsi because, of course, Tulsi probably has a better chance of winning than he does at this point. And then we have Anthony Evis Dubuisson is with us in the chat. He asks, how do you think each candidate will deal with both a coronavirus pandemic and a potential global recession? And so, Reese, I'll put the question to you first.
Well, in terms of Biden and Bernie, I think Biden would very much go for an anti-Trump approach. He would assemble, he'd basically invent like a whole branch or elevate a branch filled with experts and medical professionals to address it in a more efficient and meaningful way. It would be seen as a very serious issue. And that's been a very notable criticism of the current administration, which doesn't seem to be taking it that seriously at all. I think Bernie would try to, capitalize on it and weaponize it into basically an excuse to pass Medicare for all. And it would be about as underhanded as that sounds. So I think that's what would happen for the most part.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think that point about Medicare for all is really interesting. I haven't really even considered that. I was thinking, he was going to use it as a means to say, this is the problem with capitalism, how it's all dependent on all these things, and we need to have a more, what he might term, stable government. In other words, his version of democratic socialism, whatever that means. And I mean, don't fall for the line about Scandinavia, because representatives from all those governments have come out. And of course, you can look at the data. They're like, he's not representative of us. He's a Marxist. And bear in mind that those countries do free trade. Bernie's not for free trade. So I think, you're right about Biden, that he would assemble a panel of experts to address the problem. With somebody like Bernie, maybe I'm a bit cynical with it, but I think that he's the type of person who, and I'm sure his supporters as well would be like this, he might even just use the problem and not have so much of an interest to address it, so that he can use it to blackmail his way to getting his agenda through. So whereas Biden doesn't really care about that. So,
Yeah, no, it would be night and day, really. I think, and that's something I was saying earlier. I really recommend that people go watch Joe Biden's speech that he gave tonight, because there are no stutters, there are no gaffes. It is perfectly zen and cogent and presidential, and it was a really great speech. And I mean that sincerely. I know a lot of people think that we like Joe Biden ironically, or that basically everyone who likes Joe Biden likes him ironically. No, I genuinely do like Joe Biden, and I don't get why people don't, for the most part. I think it's really silly. And yeah, he's not my favorite politician of all time, but this was a damn good speech, and Joe Biden would make a fine president. And people who are trying to tell you otherwise and trying to, zealously push Sanders, they're out of their goddamn minds. Like, I'm
100%, 100%.
I'm almost afraid to go watch whatever fucking speech Bernie gave because I'm thinking back to last week's speeches where again, last week Biden gave a very hopeful, very powerful speech that really shocked people, and Bernie gave his same rehearsed, hacky, just angrily yelling and waving his hands speech.
Same speech for 40 years, basically, right?
And I'm so tired of that speech. I am so tired of hearing about Wall Street and big pharma and the DNC and the media. Like, just shut the fuck up.
Even Elizabeth Warren's Wall Street speeches have more nuance and sound better than Bernie's. Bernie's just sound like he's screaming into the void for 40 years. Even Elizabeth Warren, whom I disagree with, can draw together a speech that I can pay attention to more and is more interesting to listen to. So,
And I think this might have been taken from whatever speech Sanders gave today. I'm not actually sure, but there was an excerpt I saw floating around today where he was saying something to his crowd of supporters.
Bernie didn't speak. Dirty Dancer's saying he didn't speak tonight. I don't know if that's true.
I wouldn't be surprised because why would he speak? There's nothing to celebrate.
That's pretty funny, actually.
It must have. I think it was another speech that I was getting confused with. But basically, there was another speech that I saw Neera Tanden comment on. That's how I saw it. But he said something like, "I don't think that because 60 billionaires have endorsed Joe Biden, I don't think that he's going to generate the kind of enthusiasm we need to beat Donald Trump."
Huh.
And it's like, you don't even have people showing up to vote for you.
Even young people don't show up to vote for Bernie.
They don't. I'm so tired because now that Biden is the presumptive nominee, there's a lot of people, they're trying to get Biden to go further left. They're basically just trying to turn Biden into Bernie. Yeah, it's not going to happen, guys. You lost. Give it up. But they're like, no.
Well, we're losing the connection just for a second from Reese. Hopefully this resolves itself imminently. I will kind of pick up from where Reese left off. I had a point to make about this, which is that on that point about pressuring Biden to move him to the left, Elizabeth Warren is perhaps somebody that could pull that off reasonably well if she had used that leverage back when the primary was more split to say, I'll endorse you, but you need to give me some, you don't have to give me a position in administration, but give me a policy platform that you're going to move to my position on. Bernie doesn't have any leverage anymore because he has a 0% chance of winning. If he had, say, a 46% chance of winning and Biden had a 54% chance of winning, and it was clear, it's probably your time to drop out, Bernie could go to Biden and say, hey, look, I can stay in this, and we don't necessarily know that you're going to pull through at the end. So come to me on, get closer and Medicare for all, and I'll endorse you. At this point, even if he wanted to go that route, Biden's going to be like, who are you? You have as much influence at this point as Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I'm serious. Warren had more leverage than Bernie. Bernie had leverage. If Bernie dropped out shortly after Super Tuesday, you could say, "Hey, look, yes, you had the momentum, but I could have prosecuted this, and there's a 20% chance I could have taken this and won the nomination." And Biden could say, "Yeah, that's credible. I will either give you a position or I will move one of my policy platforms more in your line." At this point, if Bernie says, "Hey, look, bro, agree with me on Medicare for all," Biden's going to be like, "I'd sooner listen to Trump's advice than or bargaining than you," because Bernie has no more leverage. It's like leverage matters in that circumstance because Bernie and Biden fundamentally don't agree. Even though Biden is a pragmatist, he will strike deals. He strikes deals to get things done, to get power brokers together so that things can happen. Bernie is not a power player anymore. He has as much power at this point as in terms of this election now, as somebody who is a convict in prison that can't even vote. They both have an equal chance of getting this nomination. So
a convict who Bernie would certainly help get the right to vote, no matter what they did.
True. The marathon, the Boston Marathon bomber, for example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's someone who should really be deciding the leadership.
He literally said that there's a clip of him speaking on that issue, and Cenk Uygur, Junk Jank, all those guys, the Young Turks, said it was brave and heroic and stuff and everything.
What?
And well, no, actually, you know what? I'm not 100% sure that Jank said that, because I know that Jank is, in fairness to him, he's a bit more to the right on some criminal justice issues. No, there were people at TYT that said that even the Boston Marathon bombers should be able to vote, because Bernie was asked about that at a debate. Now, it may have been in 2016, I can't remember, but he said, yeah, look, you can point to particular people that are bad guys, but I believe that all felons who serve their term or whatever should be able to vote. Or no, I think he even said from prison. I can't, like, he's just such a bundle of cringe. You can look into this more, but he literally he did defend that position. It sounds like a joke. It sounds like a meme. Like, what do you mean you think that a terrorist should be able to vote? But I'm serious. So
I'm pretty sure he said it during this election cycle.
That's insane. I mean, that alone should disqualify you. Like, never mind all the other baggage. That alone should, like, imagine if Biden said that. Like,
oh, they'd be all over him. Yeah,
I mean,
it'd be unthinkable.
I mean, it's just, oh, we have a question here in the chat. This is from Kaka Kudava or Kaha Kudava. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce your name. How would Russia, China, Iran, and other hostile nations exploit a hypothetical Sanders presidency? Well, you've talked about that in the past, but what would sort of be your answer to that, Reese?
How would they exploit that? Well, we have evidence of Russia in the form of the Soviet Union already, having a history of trying to exploit Sanders at this point, and his sympathies for foreign hostile nations. I think that basically the reason why Russia was pushing propaganda for the Sanders campaign was because they don't need to do anything they don't need to like overtly control him. If he was in power, he would completely enable them. He would be actively uninterested in interfering in any of their schemes. He would concede the world stage to them, and there would be nothing further they needed to do. You could say the same thing for Iran. You could largely say the same thing for China. If a lot of our trade deals fell through with allied nations, that's just provides more economic opportunities for a nation like China. They'll sweep up those trade partners, and basically we'll be left isolated and in the dust. I truly believe that if we had a succession of Sanders-like presidents, we would not be much of a superpower anymore. We wouldn't be a notable nation in the world because the world would have largely moved on from us.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, that's one of the reasons I named my channel Superpower Broadcasting, is I'm interested in the preservation and expansion of American hegemony in the world. Because if you believe in liberal values and humanism and human rights, your only three choices are the two Eurasian powers of fascist Russia, communist China, or liberal America. Those are your three choices, and you are absolutely correct that.
And choose wisely. You have three choices. Choose wisely.
Those are it. Like, you can say that you like Switzerland as a country more than America, or you like when you visit France, it seems like a cooler country. Yeah, but France has no chance of being a hegemon. Those are your three choices. Which one do you most align with? Because it's not an all or nothing thing. You necessarily have to pick a lesser evil in that context, right? If you will. So I agree. I agree with those remarks 100%. And I would say, expanding beyond the Sanders thing, just the succession of Obama to Trump has seen the rise of North Korea from possessing 6 crude atomic weapons to boosted to the range of thermonuclear weapons in the hundreds targeted at America and her allies. So and that's just one country. Never mind the other enemies that just Trump and Obama, just through procrastination and turning the other cheek, have allowed to fester. Bernie would even, in some ways, even more actively be encouraging and defending and mitigating and apologizing on behalf of our enemies. And it really is, it is morally duplicitous, because he'll talk about liberal values or whatever in America, and yet he doesn't care at all for anybody outside of America's borders. He opposes any trade negotiations, as you said, right, Reese, about the trade. He opposes TPP. He opposes anything that would gain an upper hand over communist China, anything that would gain an upper hand over fascist Russia. There's a chance with Bernie that if Russia decided that they were going to expand out from Venezuela and, you know, make Nicaragua and Guatemala and say even Mexico their staging grounds for Russian thermonuclear aircraft and weapons, Bernie would say that that's just their sphere of influence, bro. So, and
Yeah,
we have 21 people with us right now.
Condemn it. Oh, can you hear me?
Okay, so we lost you there. We lost you. You're back now.
Okay. Sorry, that's weird because I could hear you the whole time. I was on the Russia making a lot of Latin America a potential staging ground, basically a Cuban Missile Crisis Part 2. Bernie might even condemn it weakly, but that's kind of the problem with Bernie. You know, he condemned a lot of, recently he condemned a lot of the atrocities happening in Idlib, Syria, but he also made sure to throw in, we need to basically, we need to find a peaceful solution, and it's just like this is not. It's very obvious where his agenda is, and
it's worse, Reese. It's worse. It's worse. I just want to draw this point very quickly, because there are a lot of people in the audience that might say, or people watching us that might say, well, at least he acknowledges the suffering there. I disagree. I think if you have no idea what an Aleppo is, as to quote Gary Johnson, or if you don't know anything about Syria, you've never heard of this stuff, you don't know where Idlib is, you don't know what's going on there, and then you oppose U.S. intervention, that's better, in my view, than if you know what's going on there and you know the horrors going on and you oppose U.S. intervention. In other words, one is a case of ignorance. You just don't know. Yes. And you can be educated. The other is a case of and you're malicious and evil and horrendous and despicable and deplorable. So
I agree. And the thing is, it's also not good enough to just say, I condemn atrocities committed in Idlib, because you really have to ask, like, okay, well, who exactly are you condemning? It's very easy. I've noticed a lot of progressives, they have jumped on. Ben Norton is a perfect example, as someone who has jumped on the bandwagon of singling out Turkey as the country that is causing problems in Syria. The only reason, and the thing is, we are not Turkey apologists on this channel. The same way that we are not Saudi Arabia apologists. But those countries are similar in one regard, and that is that they are being specifically targeted because of their alliance with Western powers and because of Turkey being a NATO nation. That is why the fifth columns don't like it. They don't like Turkey because Turkey is in NATO. If you are going to condemn atrocities that are committed in Idlib, you need to condemn the Russians, you need to condemn Iranian proxies, and you need to condemn Assad and his army. If you cannot do that,
it's amazing. Turkey's actually, in some respects, and this is kind of messed up, but they are the lesser evil here.
Yes, they are. And we have condemned them, but they are obviously a lesser evil in this context.
And that's a pill. That's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, because I'll be the first one to say Turkey has done some horrendous, atrocious things, killed a lot of innocent Kurds, So, but there's still the lesser evil. Assad's butchered 600,000 people. So,
I will say this though, because Erdogan, he was very much going for this rhetoric of condemning atrocities in Idlib. That is complete bullshit. That is not they don't care
They
about
don't care.
because they commit atrocities all the time. They don't care about those atrocities. The real reason, and some people have posited, there's also an Islamic caliphatic, if that's even a word, motivation behind a lot of their actions. The real motivation of why Turkey is involved in Syria is because Syria, being in the state it is, being under, a tyrannical thumb, pushed into a civil war that's been raging for years, displacing millions of refugees, has had a very active strain on Turkey. Where do you think a lot of those refugees go? They go to Turkey, and then
They
they
go
go
to
to Europe.
Turkey.
A big story in the news now is that Turkey is saying fuck it, and they're letting all the refugees through to Greece, and Greece is obviously
Yeah,
having even more problems now with that. So that is really the only reason. There might be a religious reason, but it's not nearly as important as this actual real world reason for why Turkey is involved in Syria. It's because the Syrian civil war has greatly infringed on Turkey as a nation. So they'll say they care about human rights. They really don't. That is complete nonsense.
I agree. I agree
But
with that a
but also
lot.
this, it's a
Yeah.
really sad state of affairs when an evil fucking country like Turkey is condemning the atrocities in a more in a more strong sense than Bernie Sanders and his
Yeah.
weak
Yeah.
rhetoric.
Bernie
That's pretty sad.
Bernie is the kind of guy. I mean, we kind of elaborated on this to answer the question, but Anthony Avistubison asked, "What are both of your thoughts on the prospect of Putin being in power until 2036?" I'll go first on this one. I I have always operated under the assumption that the only reason why Putin wouldn't be in power until 2036 is if he died of natural causes before that, because there's not going to be a coup or anything. Putin is a smart ex-KGB guy. He purges people the second anything happens. He's on the fly with that kind of stuff. He knows what's up. The only other way is if there were some intervention by to get the government out, whether through a regime change conflict or just funding an opposition movement. Putin, for all intents and purposes, whether he is the prime minister or the president, he's the one with the power. He's the one who controls the economic machine of Russia to the extent that it exists. That, mind you, their economy is smaller than Chicago. However, he has managed to, over the last couple of decades, accrue several trillion dollars in assets. I mean, we talk about Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and Bernie gets upset about how much money Jeff Bezos has, and I'm like, yeah, but if you take a look at how much money Putin personally controls, I'm not talking about as president of Russia, I'm talking in his personal bank accounts. It is several dozen times bigger than what Jeff Bezos has. And I mean, he's robbed the country for decades now. But Putin is the kind of guy that he's not going anywhere. And if he did die of natural causes or something, there's no way that we could predict who would prevail after that, because Putin doesn't even care. Putin really doesn't care what happens after he's gone. All that he cares is the prestige and enrichment right now. Because if he cared about a legacy, he would appoint one of his daughters to be the great successor, but he's not doing it. So if you don't have a dynasty in place, those kinds of dictatorships are very unstable. Look at what happened with Stalin after. Things went in a very different direction, and things can go in the reverse too. So that's kind of my thoughts, which is that he's already the dictator of Russia. He could make it 2032. He can make it 2040. It doesn't matter. He's going to be in power until he's no longer on this mortal coil, in my view. So, what are your thoughts, Reese?
This is a perfect example of why we need a president who is open to stronger trade relations with our allies and who is not against economically punishing and sanctioning our enemies. Because I think it would be in the best interest of everyone, if we had a concerted effort to economically destroy the Russian regime and let nature take its course from there. Yes, we could technically, fund. We're not going to do a traditional regime change effort anytime soon in Russia. There are real world limitations to take into account, and it is a nuclear power.
Uh,
Oh,
oh
are
yeah,
we
Reese.
are we still good?
Oh, well, the connection is kind of it kind of like I was able to hear you the full time, but I do need to stop you there because I've been scrolling through the chat and I just noticed that Anthony wants to correct us, and he's an expert in the region, and he says, "I must say to you both that I got to disagree with you all. Turkey is working hand in glove with Russia to exploit the people of Idlib, and he says that he can come on to explain why. And I am sending him a link right now because he
I'm
is a
not.
very knowledgeable."
I'm not saying that I very much said they're not pro the people of Idlib. So I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, I think he was also making the point earlier on in chat. I was just seeing it right now. I'm a bit delayed here as I read through. We've got a lot of comments. He was saying that they're working hand in glove with Russia, which has been true to some extent with Erdogan and the Eurasian Duginist sort of thing. I'm going to send over a link to Anthony Avistu Bison to come on though.
Well, yeah,
If
because
you're like,
the thing is their issue isn't with Russia, and we've clearly seen that they're open to working with Putin. Their issue is with Assad, who it makes it a complicated relationship because Assad is a Russian puppet.
yeah. I sent the link, Anthony. If you're still with us, I did send the link to your Twitter there if
Yeah,
you'd
no,
like to come on.
he can come on, but I really I don't think we have a disagreement, so he could talk about it, but I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah, we
Um,
have 22 people with us still, which is again, this is pretty cool. Like I said, you've got a lot of different choices for analysis tonight, and we often go and talk about other areas that are tangentially related to the subject matter here. Of course, if you're just joining us at Superpower Broadcasting here, we are discussing the results from tonight's primary. As well as answering questions from the chat currently about implications for foreign policy and economics and other issues with respect to Bernie and Biden. Though we have also discussed it to the extent that Bernie's chances going forward are statistically the same as Tanky Tulsi's. I personally believe that Biden has 100% chance of getting the nomination right now. However, Reese here concluded that point several months ago, which is base. So Reese, if you'd like to, take another moment, this is like Super Tuesday 2 to explain your reasoning for why, because you called this a long time ago, why Biden would eventually prevail, and you were sure of it a long time ago when even Warren was placing higher and she was the front runner. However, Anthony has appeared in the studio now, so we can let Anthony speak first, and then Reese can address the point about his OG prediction with that respect. Super Pill.
absolutely.
So
Let's let Anthony say his
let's
piece.
let's welcome Mr. Anthony Avistu Bison. He if you've tuned in to see my stream, my interview with him, he is an expert on Middle Eastern, the region in the Middle East, and Kurdish history in particular. Welcome, Anthony Avistu Bison.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible? You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Thanks for
awesome.
coming on.
That's great. So I just want to quickly address a couple things. First and foremost, I understand where Reese and Kevin, you're coming from when it comes to Turkey. Sort of have the same attitude towards them as you do Saudi Arabia. I can understand that from just a general US perspective. They are a part of NATO. They have been a part of NATO since 1951. And they are, I guess you could say, one of the key allies in the NATO alliance when it comes to the border between Europe and the rest of Central Asia. However, when it comes to Idlib in particular, I would have to disagree with you both. When it comes to Idlib, Turkey is working hand in glove with Russia. They have been working with Russia since 2015/2016. It started with the Astana peace talks, where there was an agreement between the two, between a de-escalation of the region. Turkey, being the big guarantor for the Syrian opposition, has been essentially the big guys defending the Syrian opposition. However, ever since 2015/2016, it's changed from a regime change policy, where it used to be the case that Turkey wanted to get rid of Assad from the government. It has gone to now just mainly fighting the Kurds or the Syrian Democratic Forces and so on. Turkey views Idlib almost as a buffer state to its own state. So you've probably heard about the occupation zones that Turkey has established in Afrin and the northeast of Syria through Operation Olive Branch, Operation Euphrates Shields, and Operation Peace Spring, respectively. Those zones were created specifically to do two things. The first of all was to counter the Syrian Democratic Forces from establishing a Kurdish statelet, and the second is to, of course, push the amount of refugees that Turkey has at the moment to an external periphery zone, so almost out of the major population centers. Because how the Turkish government views it at the moment is that there's growing animosity towards these Syrian refugees, that people don't want them in the country anymore. It's becoming a burden on the economy and a burden on the Turkish government. So Turkey is now pushing out about over 1.5 million of these refugees into those external periphery zones. Idlib, when it comes to Idlib, there's about 3 million inhabitants. Turkey doesn't really care about the civilian population within Idlib. It does that rhetorically. I mean, Erdogan will say, oh, we're defending the people of Idlib, because he's a politician at the end of the day. But the reality is that Turkey's working hand in glove with Putin and the Russian regime, and they do a number of agreements every couple months where one will agree, okay, I'll trade you some territory for some territory in the northeast, for example. The reason why is because Turkey wants to secure the longevity of its security zones next to its borders. So what does that mean? It wants to make sure that it has some zone that can dump its refugees in. It doesn't really care about the Idlib refugees. It doesn't even care if Idlib becomes a Salafist jihadist safe haven, which it has become quite recently. The people who are the real victims, of course, will always be the civilians, and I'm not making apologetics either for the Assad regime or the Turkish regime. What I am saying is that we should keep a clear mind what Turkey is doing over here. It's not doing it in the best of hearts. If anything, it would gladly sell parts of Idlib off to Russia if it can get a piece of territory in the northeast to establish more security zones. Because for Turkey, it's interested more in trying to make sure these refugees don't come to inside the mainland, and to make sure that these refugees stay along, you could say, the security zone. So Idlib acts, if you will, as a buffer state. So Turkey recently launched an operation called Spring Shield to defend its forces against regime forces. But you would notice when it launched that operation, it did not, launch it against Russia, because Russia were the ones that killed 30 plus Turkish troops in that operation. Instead, it did it against the regime forces to protect its, initial interests when it comes to getting its troops out in that. But in terms of long term, Idlib will be on the chopping block, and it will be traded out with Russia over time. And this only highlights the reality that Turkey does not really care about Idlib, nor does it really care about, protecting the Western lines. Because if it did, it would not have bought the S-400 system from Russia. It would not be playing these anti-American games by holding a pastor hostage, or essentially trying to tell the US to abandon its allies when it comes to the fight against ISIS. So my point really is that, yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, Reese. I can understand where you're coming from, Kevin, but I have to disagree. I don't believe Turkey's doing the best for the American interests, nor is it doing the best for any of the humanitarian interests. It's using this more as a political ploy in order to, I guess you could say, Erdogan, in order to promote his own domestic policies. Yeah.
I agree with all that. I don't think that we have a disagreement at all, really. When I pointed out the fact that the Saudi Arabian comparison and Turkey being a part of NATO, the only real reason I wasn't pointing that out as me being on the side of Turkey, I was pointing that out that I found it interesting. Some people were specifically highlighting atrocities committed by the Turks because they were aligned with Western powers, when they would never dream of condemning other actors in the region. I think that Turkey's
We lost you there, Reese.
We lost Reese for a moment there. When Reese is back, he can conclude what he was saying.
Yeah,
I think Thank you for the information. I think all of the points that you made there were essentially correct, right? I mean, I'm aware
Yeah.
that Turkey has aligned their military hardware in Russia's favor. I mean, they're at a point where they're going to go with like the PAC 500s. They're going to go with Russian fighter jets over American ones, even though American ones are they're more expensive, but they're superior in every way. I personally think that Erdogan himself. So Reese, this has happened a few times. Reese should be.
Turkey has tried to play this game of trying to keep the West on one side while keeping Russia on the other side, and it's increasingly going towards the air of Russia as the years go on. Because when it comes to the West, it's, for example, right now, Erdogan has said that, okay, we won't unpack the Patriot. Sorry, we won't unpack the S-400 missiles, but we want the Patriot missiles. And the American Central Commanders are like, and the Pentagon are just like, what? You either pick one or the other. And that's what Turkey wants. Turkey wants to try become this Eurasianist superpower. Because remember, I don't remember if you know this, but Erdogan said in the past, back in 2013, 2014, I think it was, that the world is bigger than five, so it's bigger than Russia, China, America, France, and Britain.
Yeah.
And sort of Turkey wants to, Turkey wants to be a Eurasianist power. When it comes to Russia, especially, people would think, oh, what? But Turkey shot down a plane in 2015 from the Russian military. Yeah, I agree with you there. But since then, Turkey has really repaired its bilateral relations with Russia. It's removed sanctions. For example, Russia has removed sanctions on Turkey. It's become more economically intertwined with Turkey. And there's, as I said before, the military deals as well as just the on-the-ground military offensive deals in Syria especially. So from any if you look at just like the state of things, the reality is that Turkey is not necessarily against Russia. If anything, they have tensions over the Assad regime and like that, but I guarantee you, give it a year or two and you will see President Recep Tayyip Erdogan meet with Bashar al-Assad in Ankara. They will shake hands and it will be the normalization of bilateral relations like it was back in the past. So I just see this as a theatrical show, really, and I've watched this for a long time, and I don't buy the bullshit that Turkey genuinely gives a damn about, civilians in Idlib. Because if it did, it would be striking down Russian aircraft, because Russian aircraft are the ones that are doing the major bombardment on the civilian centers. So
you're correct.
Yeah, just to put it into perspective, you got to look past the theatrics. It's all like a big show, but there's more real politics and geopolitics coming into it. I'll let Reese respond now, since he's back.
Yeah. I don't think we really disagree.
I don't think we do either. To be totally honest.
About. But the thing is, it's good you're in here because we can speak very rudimentarily about it, but you have this is your field. You have significant expertise on this that we just don't, and that means a lot because this is an important issue.
Means a lot.
This is the site of a lot of clashing factions and forces, and this it should be more of a focus than it is. I was noting the irony of, you'll have Turkey, a country who has no legs to stand on, condemning human rights abuses, many of which they're responsible for, but will somehow pass off to other parties. But you'll still have a lot of people, a lot of Western leaders and politicians and pundits who are have largely moved past this, and they don't highlight this region as being important anymore. And no, it's not like this stopped being a horrific situation. This is a completely unacceptable situation, and if all it takes if the Westerners, they only care when there's the potential of a flood of refugees into Greece, then that is a very poor reflection on Western nations, I would say.
I do have to just say that when it comes to that matter, Turkey is essentially doing blackmail against the EU. The only reason why the EU really kind of tolerates Turkey is because Turkey is the gateway to Europe. It has all these millions of refugees. And at any point, it can literally open up the gates to allow refugees to flow into Europe. And then it blames, for example, in Greece, who itself is trying to deal with both the coronavirus outbreak, but also their own security and national security. When they get these refugees and they start to defend themselves because the borders are closed enough, that Turkey immediately goes to Amnesty International, goes to the international groups and says, oh, look at what Greece is doing. How dare Greece do this? When in reality, Turkey is the one that instigated the situation to be that way and is itself going and shooting at refugees when they're trying to come back to the Turkish side. So I just say that we must look at this from the reality. I'm not saying that necessarily, I know that I do have a bias, I guess, when it comes to Kurds, and I guess I do have a little bit of bias against Turkey, but I wouldn't mind, for example, Turkey being a part of NATO if it could just reform its, institutions, if it could be more democratic, because Turkey is strategically important, but we cannot keep excusing it, especially when it plays around like this, because even if Saudi Arabia, if you want to go to Saudi Arabia, I'm going to, I guess, maybe play a little apologetics for them, at least Saudi Arabia plays ball with us, it plays ball with us.
No,
it does,
I agree, yeah. No, I agree with that. That's the thing. That's the main thing. I guess that's the note of contention to some extent here, is that the way that we were phrasing it with respect to Turkey left out the fact that Turkey tries this duplicitous, this sort of turncoat sort of strategy of, well, we're going to be with them and we're going to try to play the West for what they're worth. It's kind of how really, you're right, that Saudi Arabia is definitively on our side with respect to Israel, the oil markets, Iran, Russia, etc. Regardless of what the reasoning are. In my case, I argue that it's mostly economic interests. But still, in Turkey's case, you're right. They really can't pick a side, Anthony, on that. And in fact, the trend is that they're moving more towards, we want contracts with Russian military-industrial complex. So
I just also want to just make one more note. When it also comes to just the whole anti-Iranian focus that the United States is slowly shifting towards, Turkey has been helping Iran when it comes to avoiding the sanctions, when it comes to foreign aid. And it's also with housing groups like Hamas and other these terrorist groups that are noted terrorist groups on the US watch list, as well as are anti-Israel. And Turkey's doing this, and it knows it's doing this, and it's not doing it on the West favor because it doesn't really care necessarily about the West outside of its own, national security. I mean, even when it comes to just basic things, Putin has been bullying folks. I don't want to use the word bullying, but he has to use the word bullying. When it comes to Syria policy for the United States, it's been pushing around, it's been sort of like playing around, it's been like sort of tug of war with the State Department as well as CENTCOM. And CENTCOM's had to reluctantly, because of Trump and because of the sort of like this subtle authoritarian apologia that Trump engages with, they've had to try and hold the line. Even in some regards, they've let down the line when it comes to, of course, some of the parts of northeast Syria with that invasion that Turkey did. But I show you here, once again, that's not what an ally does. An ally does, if for example, if this was happening with Greece, if Turkey was literally invading territory of Greece, and that, can you imagine that? Just an ally does not do that kind of behavior. And then when it claims, for example, that, it wants to claim Article 5 for, I think it's Article 5 for NATO when it comes to Idlib, like, they're attacking Idlib and they're attacking our forces, therefore we need other countries to defend us because, one attack against one of us is the attack against all. But Turkey deliberately misuses that article to try and, get the US to come to its defense while also trying to play the West. It's a very, very sly, very complex, very actually cynical policy that Turkey is employing. And it's only around about time before the United States starts to look elsewhere for its geopolitical allies. And it's already doing so when it comes to trying to find a different base for, instead of Incirlik and other such areas. And I know this is sort of like getting to its own kind of topic, so I just wanted to mention that when I came on, so just to give people a bit more, I guess, of the context. Because I did hear that, and I thought, I need to sort of address that. So
absolutely. Absolutely. We value your perspective here. You're more informed on the region than we are. I've talked about before, my area of focus is mostly on North Korea and Russia to a lesser extent, mostly with like Russian domestic sort of policies, as well as in Europe. You know a lot more about the Middle East. And that is a great point of nuance that you've brought to this broadcast, which is very much appreciated here. So thank you for coming on, Anthony.
Thank you. Well, no worries. Thank you very much, Reese, and thank you very much, Kevin. You enjoyed the stream, and I shall be going now.
Oh yeah, and
See you.
anytime you want to come back on, just let us know and everything, and we can talk more specifically on this issue, on the Middle East, and we'll have a broadcast dedicated to it, right? So
okay, definitely. Well, anyway, have a good day, both of you. Goodbye.
Yeah, have a good day, Anthony.
Have a good one, man.
Okay. That was valuable. See, we are the kind of stream here where even if in that case we didn't really have a disagreement, it was just a point of nuance that needed to it needed an expert's analysis there to draw the clear sort of to fill in the gaps and whatnot of the apology.
I get it, because I don't want it to. I don't want to sound like I'm making up excuses for Turkey.
Yeah,
because that's not what I'm doing. But it could come across that way. So no,
that's the thing. That's why that was very important, and we were happy and appreciative of Anthony to come on there and make it crystal clear here. And we all basically agree. But it's good when you got experts and whatnot, even if they disagree. And they've got and you're somebody who's got clear credentials and whatnot, to the point that you have a legitimate contest with what we're saying or whatnot. Let us know. I personally am open to being corrected, of course. Usually we'll respond in the chat. Anthony's like a personal friend of ours, so we can bring him on the stream, of course. So because he's already vetted. So
absolutely. Well, we're lucky to have very informed contacts, and people from a lot of different walks of life, different backgrounds, different areas of expertise. Anthony has the Kurds, he has Syria and Turkey. You have North Korea. I don't know what I have. Venezuela, I guess.
You in particular, you're somebody who focuses a lot on, as I've done more in my recent work in the last year and a half or so, a lot of like the political culture and the sort of memetics and stuff. That's one of the things that ties in with Russia, of course. But you often go after the fifth columns within the West, which is important, because we can talk a lot about our enemies and our rivals, but it really is because we live in a democracy where you have freedom to voice opinions and stuff. Their influence within our own borders really is what makes or breaks our resolve on the world stage, because Russia can't beat us in a war. But if they can convince everybody to listen to like Michael Tracy and Kremlin Kyle and Jimmy Dore, they don't need to, because we'll let them do whatever they want anyway. So
yeah, there will be no actual fight put up against them.
Exactly. That's how they win, is the memes. They do the memes. So
it's a big part of why we have the current administration we do, because a lot of people on the right were basically they were fed propaganda for years that Putin was this great Christian who had reformed Russia from its evil atheistic ways. And Russia was a great country. They were saying, God bless Russia. And it's no wonder. It's no wonder that eventually that was going to actually lead its way into negative policies. It wasn't just going to be a rhetoric anymore. And
it's just amazing. It's just amazing because this is coming from a group of people who are just completely allergic to any facts on the ground, of course, because Russia, only about 3% of Russians attend church once a month or more. Most of them are either drinking vodka or snorting crocodile or whatever. A very nihilistic sort of country, and they're led by a leader who clearly he's an ex-KGB guy who's just using the Russian Orthodox Church just as the patriarch of the church is doing, so that he can get swag and pomp and circumstance. And yet they look at a country like America, where 30% of Americans go to church once a month or more, and then they call that degenerate. So it's like it's clearly not even so much about the religion for them. A lot of them themselves are not even religious. It's that they hate America and they make excuses for America's rivals. So because America is a more Christian country than Russia, but it's also a more liberal country. So You also have freedom in America, and they don't like that. So they'd rather have a country that is mostly atheist, but where the government is officially Christian, than have a country like America where there are a lot of Christians, but you also have the freedom to be an atheist. It's ridiculous. So
yeah, no, it's and we do talk a lot about, you know, enemies across the pond, but there are enemies all around us. They're, you know, they're very much like it's kind of strong rhetoric to use, but I do mean it very seriously. We're surrounded by people who are not on our side in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
They're
like
not there.
Guantanamo Bay. Guantanamo Bay is the more blatant version of them. But even though Guantanamo Bay looks like what eyebrows raised when he said that America deserved 9/11, bear in mind that the videos that were posted of him, most of the ratios were positive likes. So he's got 50,000 people at least that live in America that would agree with that statement, and that's representative not just of those 50,000. If you were to do a poll and there were no consequences for voting the wrong way or whatever, just to gauge people's actual opinion, given the Kremlin Kyles, the Neckbeard Jimmies, even on the right with, like, you know, Andrew Anglin, those types of people, that, yeah, there's probably a lot of people, probably, you know, I'm not going to say it's 10%, but there's a sizable percentage of people that would say that America deserved it, that you would not find in a country like Russia. You just wouldn't see people saying, yeah, we deserve to get bombed. Like, even if they're not a fan of Putin, they're against Russia being attacked. You know, like, even the opponents of Putin in Russia don't want Russia to get attacked. Yet in America, there are people who say, yeah, we deserved it. That is kind of unprecedented in human history, that there are that many people that are opposed to their own country from within. Like, and they're not spies. They're not on the Kremlin's payroll. They're just useful idiots. It's crazy. That wasn't a thing that happened in World War I. You rooted for your side even if you were on the wrong side. It's like, you know, and it's not like it's some critical thinking, bro. It's good to be able to step back from nationalism. No, they choose the anti-humanist side. Like, the critical thinking would say, yeah, I support America whether I live in Russia or America, but they support Russia whether they live in Russia or America. It's well, of course, if they actually lived in Russia, most percent of the time they would not be an oligarch. They'd be some dude, you know, taking crocodile, making $500 a year. They probably wouldn't be a fan of Putin then. But it's easy to be a fan of Putin when mom's paying for your hydro or whatever in your basement. So,
yeah, it is interesting in that regard, because I don't want to say it's completely unwarranted. There's certainly been a lot of ultra national, you know, nationalistic, jingoistic rhetoric, even throughout this country's origin, or not origin, but just history in general. And I understand at some point, you know, taking issue with it, because there are people who, you know, and it's not us, it's not anyone associated with this community, but there are people who would try to tell you that America has done nothing wrong, and that's not true. And I would be equally criticizing those people, but I think that we've taken it a step or two too far at this point in the other direction. It's, you know, I'm all for criticizing the country if it's coming from a reasonable point of view. If it's coming from a point of view that I'm criticizing the country, I'm criticizing something the country did, but ultimately I am still pro the national interests of this country. I am still pro the national security of this country.
yeah.
And the people who we debate, I never feel once like those are things they even care about.
No, you're right. I remember watching Young Turks in 2008, 2009, and oftentimes when they would levy criticism against America that would seem, you know, anti-American, they would cover it, or they would posit it as, we're trying to help American security here by having less terrorists. And now, because they would talk about blowback and stuff like that and everything, and sure, they were largely full of it, But people like Ben Mankiewicz, I believe, were genuine about that. That they were misguided, but they were genuinely trying to make America more secure, even though we would disagree with their conclusions. Now we can see it for ourselves. Look at what Hassan Piker says. Look at what Guantanamo Bay says. Look at what Kremlin Kyle says. Oh, the Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. Oh, we deserved it. Actually, the terrorists are just brown people trying to protect themselves. We're the bad guys. Like, that's their argument. They actively don't care about our security anymore. They're on the side of the terrorists. They're not trying to reduce terrorism. They're not trying to make America not have as many terrorist attacks. They think America deserved it. So,
well, a lot of them clearly don't care about American national security because they're doing, they're trying their damnedest to turn Afghanistan into a terrorist safe haven again.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that. The Taliban in 2001 controlled over 70% of Afghanistan. Today, because you often hear this narrative about how, 20 years of war and nothing was accomplished. No, that's not true. The Taliban controls about under 13% of Afghanistan today. So that is over 50-point swing in terms of the control. The urban areas were liberated. Afghanistan has a fighting chance at a republic now. And we're just going to say, oh, everybody who died, even if you don't care about the people on the ground, all those Americans who died, they died in vain. And now we're going to have the Taliban there who they promised that they won't give harbor and financing to terrorists anymore, that they won't work with Al Qaeda. It's like, okay, they themselves are terrorists. Like, even if they kept their word on that, then the Taliban would be the ones doing the terrorism against America.
They're clearly not interested in ceasing their aggressive acts.
I'm so done. Like, the gun shark here says it's woke self-loathing. I would agree with that to the extent of a lot of the Bernie Bros and stuff. But in the case of some of the people like Guantanamo Bay, it goes beyond self-loathing. They actively identify with the other side. They don't even see themselves as a part of America. They are on the other side. They live in America, but they're on the other side, and
they take advantage of all of the benefits of America as well.
Yeah, that's right. They'll often use the internet. They will use the internet to make pro North Korea, or as they call it, MDPRK talking points. And you're like, buddy, all that they have in North Korea is Red Star. If you're an elite 10% of the country, then you have access to their little intranet. The rest of the country has nothing and no electricity. There is no internet there. You can't even go on the internet to praise Kim Jong-un in North Korea because you're not allowed to use the internet. But you're allowed to do it in America. And see, that's the thing. That's where that's where I can come across as anti-democratic, because I think that a democracy needs to be more aware of the inherent weaknesses that it brings. In other words, Machiavelli talked about, here I go, I'm the evil neocon, I'm going to bring up Machiavelli. Machiavelli talked about in Discourses on Livy in particular, he talked about how a smart dictator thinks like a democrat in order to stay in power, and a smart democracy in times of crisis knows when to think like a dictatorship in order to preserve itself. Because our enemies, they know how to think. They know they've read Machiavelli, but we don't learn from that. We don't learn from that. We're actively letting these memes and things fester and accrue and ultimately multiply within our own borders, to the point that eventually that moral duplicity, that cognitive dissonance, that will eat away and corrode the moral foundation of what we originally standed for in the first place. And then it will make sense to say, my constitution, let's just get rid of it. Who cares? The founding fathers were capitalist pigs, or the founding fathers were colonialist pigs, or whatever. There's so many terms out there that you could use to, instead of say, the founding fathers, yeah, sure, they might have had slaves, but they had the idea that you can have a perfecting document over time. That they were smart enough to see, we're probably not doing everything right now, but we'll put the institutions in place that can evolve over time to become a more perfect union. They say, screw it, let's go with Putin. They are our enemies. I use that term. It sounds strong. That's because it's a strong term. It's warranted. 100% it's warranted. So 100%.
Sorry, I have a little bit of an update. Let me make sure that
Yes.
that's
Oh,
correct.
yeah. No, I would appreciate any updates because as of the last time we had tuned into those, we were still waiting on some results in North
Yeah.
Dakota, though Bernie was up 10, and we had a statistical tie in Washington, though I don't recall what percent of the precincts had been reported. So
Okay, so Washington is still tied. Washington hasn't changed at all for whatever reason. It's still 67% reporting. This is according to the Guardian. The update is in North Dakota, and
Yep.
this is 77% reporting. This is really funny. Okay, keep in mind we said before that currently North Dakota is Bernie's biggest lead and feasibly his only lead, because he only the only other thing he has besides losses is a tie in Washington. And before it was up 10%. Now Bernie has 49% and Biden
same as before.
and Biden has 42%.
Oh,
So
it's a
now
7-point differential because before it was 49 to 39.
Yep, it directly mirrors the Idaho results,
Idaho,
which
they netted out.
Remember, Idaho was Biden's smallest lead, and now Bernie's biggest lead went down from 10 to 7 points, and it might fall further because there's still more to report from North Dakota.
Oh man, Reese, we have to do it. We have to take a moment here. This is a night of fat W's. We need to check in on Mississippi because the last time we checked, Biden was up 66 points over Bernie. 66 points. Is he up 70 points now? Let's take a look.
It looks like Mississippi is still the same, and Mississippi is pretty much fully accounted for.
Gotcha.
It's 98% reporting. So
yeah.
I doubt that that's going to shift all that much. It's still, that's still an amazing victory. But
it's 66 points though. It's 66 points. That's just, that's just low information voters. It doesn't count. Bernie can still go through because everybody who's woke will vote for Bernie and he'll win because 70% of Americans are progressive after all. That's what Cenk reminds us of. 70%.
That's why Cenk won in California, right?
Oh no! Well, California is the most progressive state, and Cenk won huge.
Yeah, if
Cenk got 100, Cenk got 160% of the vote in California.
America's very progressive, and I just figured that California would be even more progressive. So, like Cenk's probably like the president of a new country called California.
Well, what happened was he was running for a seat there, but because he got over 150% of the vote, they round up. He got 2 seats. So, but there has been discussion though with the committee rules that they might have to make an exemption for him and actually give him 3 seats because when they showed him the 2 seats and he tried to sit in them, his Buffalo profile could not be contained within the 2 seats. So. Yeah, you are watching Superpower Broadcasting right now. Subscribe if you enjoy our memes. We do serious commentary here, of course. We also like to have fun. We also like to take dubs.
So. Give Kevin, give him some super chats or Patreon.
Subs for dubs. We got big dubs going on. Let's get big subs
for that joke. That was worth some kind of donation. Somebody do this.
Oh man. No, it's amazing because of course, to spoiler alert for those who haven't seen what actually happened yet. Cenk actually didn't win in California.
Oh yeah. Can you pull those up quickly?
Yeah, I will get the stats. It's pretty great. I'm gonna get the stats. It's pretty based.
Those are worth taking a look at again.
Yeah, so here we have, these are the polls. This is from March 3rd, 2020, 11 p.m. from Business Insider. That we're looking at California's 25th congressional district. Just gonna get the stats up. Let's get the stats. No, they didn't actually provide a chart there. I'm gonna go down further down and see if I can find. Oh, here we go. New York Times. Yes, here we go. Here we go. This is brilliant. I appreciate the New York Times. They laid this out in a very user-friendly way. This was updated, over a week ago. These are the results we're looking at right now. However, 75% are currently reporting because they're still counting in California. And this has been a week now. We have in first place candidate Christy Smith of the Democratic Party, 39,416 votes, 35.2%. We have in second Mike Garcia, Republican Party, 28,981 votes, 26%. And then you're thinking, okay, let's see how Cenk did. No, we have Steve Knight in third place. Republican, 19,782 votes, 17.6%. Now we finally come to the Buffalo, Cenk Uygur, not even cracking five figures here. Democrat, 6,926 votes, 6.2%. 6.2%. So yes, TYT Army. Yes, they have 5 million subscribers. Yeah, they have 50,000 views per video. That's about 100 times less views per sub as my channel gets. So turns out doesn't really get you too far. So 6%. Yeah, and there was an analysis done that had realized that Cenk spent over $1,000 in ads per vote. Now we lost Reese here. We lost Reese. However, he should be back shortly. The Gun Shark says oof. I agree. I concur with that. Big oof for progressive goofs, of course. Big oofs for progressive goofs. Yes, we have the prince. He has returned.
Sorry about that. I keep forgetting that every time that I try to check on Twitter, it exits me out of here. So I'm just gonna try to stay off Twitter, and I'll look at the results.
Were you able to hear my my reporting of the polls or the precincts?
I heard the results for Cenk's election, but
yeah, that's the one. He spent over $1,000 per vote.
I was more curious if there was for Bernie's votes in California, if those had for the most part come in at this point.
Well, we will look it up, but we've got Big Dibs in the chat. He says 5% Cenk. And that is rude. That is offensive. That is demeaning. That is a dirtbag move, Tibbs, because he's not 5% Cenk. We have to correct you there because the progressives they're super legitimate. He's 6% Cenk.
Yeah, man, don't take that 1% away from him.
6% Cenk. 6% Cenk. So the next time he talks about 70% of America is progressive, just say, yeah, but 6% of California goes with Cenk. So I mean you can't with these guys. These guys, like I said before, you were off of the connection. Big oofs for progressive goofs. 100%.
200%.
550%.
Over 9,000%.
It's over 9,000.
Oh
man. No, there's so many memes. See, like that's one of the great things about this. Every day, another meme. Some of the memes are just kind of cringe, of course. If you look at Globe/Rose Twitter, they are one and the same at this point. They have merged. They have merged to own me because I had accused them of being Rose Twitter back in January and been living it rent free in their head ever since. So they said, I guess we can't really argue with Kevin. Let's just become socialist to own him because they've let it out of the bag. So, you got lots of memes. We got lots of memes out there. big memes. I think 6% Jank is a meme that has so much potential. That's like the third. That's the trilogy. We have or the Trinity here, because we got 3 base nicknames for Jank. We of course have Devin Tracy's nickname for him is the Brown Buffalo, if I recall. Mine is Junk Jank, and now Tibbs. Well, he said 5% Jank, but we got to be fair. We got to be fair here. He's 6% Jank.
Yeah,
So,
gotta keep it accurate around.
he reported as it is 6%. We don't say 5%. CNN would say 5% to try to make Jank not look popular. But we speak the truth here at Superpower Broadcasting. MSNBC, all the corporate Dems over there, they would try to hide the groundswell of support around Jank and try to say he had 4.8%. No, we give credit where credit is due. He got 6% of the vote in the primary in California's 25th district. I mean, he didn't get 5%. Those are lies. Those are corporate Democrat lies. And I will not stand for them on this channel. I will not let them.
I can't say I have a specific nickname for Jank other than, adding an insulting word to his name, like bellowing Jank or raging Jank.
Raging Jank.
Honestly,
that actually sounds kind of cool. That sounds that's not as good as Neocon Ghoul,
it's too cool.
It's kind of cool.
Honestly, just calling him Jank is insulting enough. So,
well, I like Junk Jank.
Junk Jank. That one's pretty good.
Like, I came up with it. It's kind of simple. I know a lot of people have been criticizing me lately. Again, to bring this back to the whole Loeb Twitter thing. A lot of people think my nickname for Lil Dylan, Mediocre Meisner, that it's a cringy nickname because I call him Mediocre Meisner. That's kind of the point, because he calls me Cringe Castley. So if he's that basic, I'm not coming up with a sophisticated nickname for him. He's just going to be Mediocre Meisner. That's like if you say, your nickname was uninspired. It's not really that original. Yeah, r/whoosh, bro. So
very true. I don't know if we didn't say this, and I'm not sure if it changed from the last time we reported it, but the current delegates, Biden has 823, Sanders has 663.
That hasn't changed, but I'm going to look up California primary results for the whole state right now, because
good idea.
The 25th had 70% of the precincts in. I'm going to the New York Times. New York Times is good with the user friendliness on this. Let's just take a look here. Let's just take a look. Take a look at this. Okay, we have 89%. Oh, so the California, the total state has way more of the precincts in than Jank. It's possible, given those numbers, theoretically, that Jank could move up to actually become 8% Jank. But if
he's growing, if
there was an upset, if there was a massive upset, but realistically speaking, they count the early ballots first. The early ballots tend to be the more progressive. The later ballots, I mean, realistically speaking, you know what? I was unfair to Tibbs. By the end of this, after it's all counted, given the way that the momentum usually goes, he will be 5% Jank. So right on the money there, Tibbs. You got the prediction. You're ahead of the game. You're like 5 steps ahead, dude. So big up, Tibbs. We have in the California state primary election results 2020. We have, because remember when we reported this live on the Super Tuesday stream back on Superpower Broadcasting, we were joined with Reese as well. He was up 10%, and then it went up down to 9%, of course, as they counted the ballots that were cast that day. Now Bernie Sanders and this is in California. Bernie Sanders is he's at 34%. with 1.47 million votes against Biden with 1.16 million votes at 26.9%. And you think, well, that's kind of a sizable margin. However, it's only a 7.1% margin. So he's dropped a 1.9% differential in just the last week of counting. There's a chance that when all of this is said and done and they count that last 11% of votes, he only beat Biden by 6% in the most progressive state in the country.
And keep in mind that this was while Bloomberg and Warren were still running. So they
And
took
Buttigieg. Yes. No,
Yes.
you are right. You're right. We have to go through the results.
he was technically dropped out, but people still voted for him.
They still voted, and a lot of them didn't realize that he had dropped out because everybody's name still shows up on the ballot because he didn't drop out. He suspended his campaign, so they keep your name on the ballot, even though for all intents and purposes, dropping out means that, or suspending means you've dropped out. You still show up on the ballot. And so in terms of the people that voted for Warren here has 560,000 votes with 13.2%. Bloomberg has 568,000 votes with 13.2%. Buttigieg has 5.2% with 226 or 225,000 votes. Klobuchar got 114,000 votes, 2.6%. Steyer, 97,000 votes, 2.3%. Yang, 0.8% of the country, or rather of California, vote for Yang. He got 37,000 votes. Tulsi Gabbard is here. This is great because great news for her, because when we went through it before, she was actually behind Castro and Bennett, and Williamson. But now she's moved up 4 places to where she's ahead of Julian Castro now. She got 0.6%. I know we often call her the 1%, how she's always the 1%. Turns out, no, she's the 0.6% here. She had 26,864 votes. And then Castro has about half of that. Bennett has about half of that. Williamson got 5,777. And then Roque de la Fuente got 4,989 votes. So, even De La Fuente got, a fifth of what Gabbard got, which is, I like that, because it's like Gabbard, I've said this before. She was one of the reasons I started this channel, was I was worried that, like, we live in the era of cringe. What if she gets traction? I hate Gabbard. But thankfully, that nightmare fuel will not manifest. She is not going to be president. Neither is Bernie, and it's great. It's great. It's great because
lots of good news.
Biden. Awesome news. Awesome news. But I will, of course, let Reese speak here. So
I wanted to. I mentioned it briefly, but because my prediction, there's been some rumors circulating that Bernie is going to drop out soon. I don't believe that that's true. No one's really named any reliable sources. It's just conjecture and rumor. And now, granted, he doesn't really have many places to go, but I don't think it's really in Bernie's character. I think that they're trying to formulate some kind of comeback, even though it's not going to happen. But we do have an upcoming debate between Bernie and Biden on the 15th, and of course we have on the 17th we have another series of primaries. So my first question is, do you think Bernie would drop out before the debate?
Oh, I don't personally think that he would. As you mentioned, his character and everything, he's got 40 years of not getting anything done and not being useful. It would be a huge shocker if he finally decided, I'm going to drop out and endorse Biden so that we can beat Trump and be useful. I can't see that happening. And of course, that's the one thing that would break the cult of personality, because if he did do that, sure, he'd have some fans stay with him, but a lot would call him a sellout. A lot would call him a corporate dem. A lot would say that, I'm done with democracy, bro. A lot would just go the Jeremy Corbyn route. And I love to see these people so thoroughly BTFO'd in the public square. It's brilliant. So.
Oh, it is, for sure. I agree with that. I agree with that for sure.
We have a comment. Yep.
I don't think he would be interested in dropping out, and he's certainly going to want to speak. But there were a couple interesting things that happened that I think led people to think this. Well, first being that, and this was pointed out to us earlier, that Bernie didn't speak tonight. Now, granted, I think that that's probably just because there was nothing to be said from his side. I mean, they couldn't really congratulate themselves. The other thing was during Biden's speech, he had a point where he thanked Bernie Sanders and his supporters for their energy, their fearlessness, something like that. Basically, he didn't say a mean word about Bernie or the campaign during the speech, and that got some people speculating that maybe they had talked behind the scenes and had reached some kind of agreement. But again, that doesn't seem like Bernie to me.
But that doesn't necessarily seem like something that Biden would do either, because Biden's a classy guy. He won big. He's not going to rub it in. He wouldn't need to see anything. Like if they were tied, he might have said something, or if he narrowly won, he might have said some mean things towards Bernie to like try to crush Bernie's chances. But he knows he's got no shot, so he's like, I'm not going to bully him. So
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of the
He's a
people I
classy
saw
guy.
who were speculating that were progressive pundits, and they've been radicalized to the point where a politician being courteous is seen as a grand collusion conspiracy.
Collusion, bro.
Rigged by the establishment to
It was a no good evil DNC rig
to suppress Bernie. And yeah, they take very innocuous things like that and make it a lot more sinister than it probably is. Sure is.
They think they're still complaining that the DNC rigged it in Iowa and stuff against Bernie.
Oh, boo-hoo.
And they're blaming this whole thing, all this momentum and everything was because Bernie didn't win Iowa when he was the rightful winner. And how the media didn't fairly hype up how much he won New Hampshire. And if the media had spent more time focusing on that, maybe people would have thought that he would be the front runner and then vote for him. And all this crap. And it's like, we've talked about it before. New Hampshire was not impressive. So
No. It really wasn't. I'm going to ask you for your prediction on a couple other things. So we're probably going to do this in a week's time, because I'm guessing that Bernie's going to stay in. So this is still going to be going on.
Yes.
And technically, I mean, primaries, they're going to be happening even if Bernie dropped out. Because Gabbard would still be running.
Maybe Gabbard, and Roque de la Fuente.
Chance. She finally.
Roque de la Fuente is still running, to my knowledge.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's almost up there with Gabbard, right? So.
I think I don't think a lot of people know that, because I mean, technically Trump is involved in primaries at the moment too.
True. He's been getting like 89%. The thing that's funny is that Trump's margins of victory in some of these states, it's like Biden level, like some of them. A lot of them, it's clear cut. He gets almost everything. Others, weld and stuff, it's a bit closer, but like 70%, 80% sort of range. Biden's almost getting those margins in a contested primary, like in Alabama and stuff, and Mississippi. Like he did almost as well in Mississippi as Trump has done in the Republican primaries, but Trump's the obvious incumbent. Like what? Like that's how powerful Biden is.
No one cares about Bill Weld. He's not actual competition for Trump.
Exactly, but people care about Bernie, and Biden's crushing Bernie by almost as much as Trump's crushing Weld. To me, that's such a meme. That's an underreported meme from this, is that Bernie's almost like a non-contested kind of candidate, like a show candidate.
We'll get Yang on the case, because there's some interesting math there. Basically, the math seems to be indicating that Biden would potentially do well in a general election against Trump.
Oh, big time.
It's
I mean,
not out of the question that he could hold his own.
He would win Florida, I believe. I believe that Biden, depending on how
and remember, last time Florida went to Trump, and that was seen as a huge victory for him.
Yeah, Florida is a quasi-Republican type state, kind of purplish red. The thing is, Biden is the kind of guy that I feel he has now he doesn't have as much a diverse base in the Latino community as he does in the African American community. However, I feel that he could more easily court voters in Florida that are just there's a lot of them are either they've left Cuba or they have relatives who've left Cuba. They're sick of Trump's apologetics for communist dictators, and Biden doesn't do apologetics for communist dictators. So
that'd certainly be something. I'm going to get your predictions on. So next week we're going to do this is the 17th of March, and it is going to be very, very interesting. So I'm just going to name the states, and you tell me what you think is going to happen.
All right.
Arizona.
So I haven't looked at any polling from Arizona thus far. I think that, yes, Bernie is probably going to do okay with some of the urban areas around there, where he's got a lot of ground game or whatever. But I think that Biden is going to carry the state. I think Biden's probably going to win Arizona by a margin of the 5 to 10 point range. So,
and it's also worth noting that Biden got a recent endorsement from Kristen Sinema.
Oh, okay.
Who's obviously a senator, a prominent senator in Arizona. So I'm not sure how much of an effect that would have, but I think it's indicative of if that is the kind of moderate Democrat who is popular in Arizona. And again, keep in mind, Arizona is a state that will often go for the Republicans.
Oh yeah,
and moderate Democrats do well there, and of course, if moderate Democrats do well there, Biden will do better than Sanders.
Well, that's true. I mean, to Young Turks, to Cenk and those guys, they've basically called Sinema a Republican or a Republican by default, basically. So
they call everyone a Republican.
They call everyone a Republican. That's right. I mean, that's the thing. They would say that this is like a Republican channel or whatever because we're not pro Bernie, that kind of stuff. It's kind of a joke. But what do you think is going to happen in Arizona, Reese?
I think that Biden would win it overall, but I think that it would be closer than some of the other states.
Yeah, so we're in agreement on that. We'll just run through the states and then we'll wrap this up because I gotta go to bed pretty shortly.
Fair enough. Florida.
Next state.
This is easy.
Oh man, Florida. It's going to be like a 15 to 20 point lead for Biden. I don't see Bernie having any sort of basis to legitimacy because unlike in the Arizona example, unlike in the Washington example, where if it's close or even if it's tied, Bernie still wins these core urban areas. That's not going to repeat in Florida because there are a lot of Cuban immigrants and families who have relatives that have fled Cuba. They despise what Bernie has said about the Cuban Revolution and his apologetics for not only Castro, but the Sandinistas. They're done. Like the urban areas will go for Biden as well. I think it's going to be massive. Now Bernie's still going to have a lot of young white voters that would still support him that don't care. They think communism's cool and woke or whatever. So I don't think it would overall be like a 50 point sort of thing. It won't be like Alabama, but he's not going to. There's a chance that Biden carries basically every county in Florida, but Bernie still has enough support spread out that it's not like a crushing thing. It'd probably be like 20 points. Because there's some white cringy people throughout that state. But Biden, I think, is probably going to win like almost every county, if not every county. So, because he does well in urban areas and rural. No, he doesn't do well in urban areas unless Cubans or people that have an experience with communism live there. Then he'll do well. So,
yeah, I couldn't say for sure. I think that the victory will be a bit more crushing than that. I don't think it's going to be close, especially based on the track record that Biden's had with the southern states, plus the Castro remarks. I don't see Bernie doing well at all in Florida for the most part. Illinois, this one's interesting.
Ooh.
Given it being the state of
Yeah.
that Obama was representing before.
Yeah, Obama. See, here's the thing. This is funny because Young Turks often talks about how Obama has refused to endorse Biden, and they use that to say, that Obama secretly knows that Biden's going to lose to Trump and everything. And for me, I'm usually pretty cynical, but on this, I think I take Obama's words at face value when he says that he wants to stay neutral in the primary so that he won't endorse somebody who winds up losing, say, in some example, and then it hurts their chance against Trump. I really do think that Obama's just kind of a classy guy here who he'll endorse Biden after the primaries are finished, and that if Bernie won, I think that Obama would probably endorse Bernie too. But
yes, I do agree with that. I think that he's more concerned about the fate of the party than his personal relationship with any.
Yes. And they're trying to use that to see even Obama knows that Biden would lose to Trump. And it's like, no, he's just trying to be impartial in the primary. See, they think everything's a conspiracy or that there's like, I mean, it's just such a batshit mindset, man. But I think, I think that in Chicago,
not to mention how exhausting it would be. Like literally,
I mean,
like if you spend every moment of every day thinking people are out to get you, it's just gotta be tiring, I think.
I mean, it's like I'm tired right now, but I mean, the thing is, you would say, well, Bernie is probably going to do well in the center of Chicago, that sort of area, urban areas, generally speaking. But the problem is, there are a lot of African Americans that live in Chicago that are going to vote for Biden. Like Bernie's whole thing about the urban advantage that the more progressive candidate tends to get, that's only true if it's a predominantly white city. If there are blacks that live in the city or Cubans that live in the city, it's going for Biden. So I think Biden's going to win almost every county in Illinois. I think it's going to be a shutout. Like, I don't think literally it's going to be 100-0, but I think like we're probably looking at 15 to 25 point victory for Biden. So
it would probably be similar to Missouri, to some of the results we saw there, where it was a victory, but it wasn't as crushing as Mississippi was.
Yeah, that's right, because there are a lot of like white guys and stuff that live in Chicago proper that like think Jimmy that Bernie and communism are cool. Jimmy Dore that are going to go out there and say, like they're going to be woke and talk about, how Biden is a racist or whatever. And actual African Americans are going to go out and say like, this Bernie dude isn't representative of me. And they're going to, in large numbers, vote for Joseph Biden. And then the Bernie bros are going to call them low information and Uncle Toms. And then they're just going to like Biden even more. So,
and the last state that will be having a primary on March 17th, Ohio.
Oh, that's not even close. We're going to see results there that are going to more or less mirror Michigan, in my view. It's another one of those like Rust Belt sort of states where it's like a right populist can, in circumstances, win it. A left populist can't even beat a left moderate like Biden. Biden's going to win Idaho. I mean, not Idaho, Ohio. Ohio's Kasich state. Ohio went for Trump. Bernie, the only way that Bernie could win that is moving very far to the right in his rhetoric, which he won't do. Biden is going to clean. He's going to clean up. Like there's a chance. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but there's a chance that statistically exists. It's not zero. Maybe it's 2%. Maybe it's 5%. There's a chance that Biden gets the majority, or at least the plurality, in every single county that's up in that primary, all 4 states. There's a chance it happens. There's a chance he doesn't win a single county for Bernie. It's a literal shutout.
That would be I mean, you thought this week was bad, and granted,
no, I mean,
this week's pretty bad for Bernie.
The only way that he could do it is that Ohio's pretty white, and he picks up some urban counties based on white progressive votes in Ohio. That's the only way he avoids a shutout, because he's not winning urban areas in Illinois. He's definitely not winning urban areas in Florida. Mm-hmm. There's no way. I mean, all this talk about how he polls better with Hispanics, like Latinos and everything. Yeah, but that is non-Cuban Hispanics. So, Like, I mean, just look into the stuff that he said about the revolution. For those in the audience here, he called the Cuban Revolution deep. He said that for him personally, it was a very deep revolution. That's a revolution that murdered like 70,000 people. Like, it was deep. Yeah, the mass graves were deep, bro. No. The only way that Bernie wins a county is in Ohio, some white city in Ohio. That's it. That's all that he's got. That's all that he's got. And even then, Biden's probably going to win it. And if it does happen, we can replay these clips. Where I said, like, yeah, he's going to win every county. I'm not saying he's going to win every county, but there is a chance that was not present before that he wins every county. It wouldn't have happened in 2016, wouldn't have happened earlier on in the primary cycle. We're so far into this now, and it's so clear that Biden is the obvious front runner that has 100% chance of getting the nomination no matter how long it takes. There's a chance that Biden wins every county of all those 4 states. So,
damn.
That's like Reagan 1984 level dubs. So,
yeah, it's pretty crushing, and
I would love to see it. I'd love to see it because it would be the ultimate rebuke for posterity of American progressivism.
It's not helped by the fact that the narrative going from this week is going to be major victories from Biden in Michigan. Obviously was seen as a big one, and reportedly so far no Sanders victories at all. So
no Sanders victories. Well, no, he did win in one metric though that we need to be fair and give him credit for, because you said that the only thing that he won in tonight was the only place that he won in was North Dakota, but that's not true. He also won in losing the most states tonight. So
and he didn't technically win. He's leading in North Dakota, but North Dakota is not really. Well, let me look at that one more time. Hold on.
Yeah,
North Dakota isn't called.
So what do we think? I've got a question for you then, Reese, and then we're going to wrap this up here. Where do we think now that it's been done and this is the demise, this is the end, this is the dub bookend to a 40-year career of cringe and lacking accomplishments? Where do we think now that his base, those 27%, the Bernie Bros, the Branch Bernardians, all of them, where do they go? Do they become like Corbynites or even more radical and call for a literal revolution and say we're done with democracy? Or do they maintain claiming, what they have now and look for another progressive candidate? Or do they cut the crap and finally grow up and some of them actually join the moderate movement?
That is a very interesting question. I don't think that they're even capable of a real revolution. They're just not the bros for it, really. They're not like Castro or Che Guevara or anyone like that. They're just not. I think a lot of them will pout and sit out the election. Some of them might even vote for Trump.
Oh yeah.
Although I don't know how they could possibly justify it this time, because
they're both populist though, bro. They're both populist. That's what Kyle would say. Kyle would say that Trump and Bernie have more in common than Biden and Bernie. That's what Kyle would say. Kremlin Kyle.
Well, he'll be a continued issue. I think they will continue to feel sorry for themselves, feel like victims, and they're going to be on the lookout, basically, at this point, for a new savior. Some of them were trying to push AOC to run. Uh-oh.
Yo, I'm blocking this dude. I just noticed that there's a hater and a traitor in the chat. He's gone.
I was fine with him. I was just joking.
The glorious strategist. Nah, no, I'm not gonna have that kind of rhetoric in the chat. That I'm not down for that anymore. So
I tried to type something vulgar, but it wouldn't let me, so I had to.
Oh, I thought that you purposefully typed the asterisk in, but it just did that for you. Okay.
No, I had to. I did that after, because I tried to post the comment uncensored and it wouldn't let me. but it's
was it you don't have to answer this. Was it a word that started with an F or an R?
it started with an F. I could have I
Okay.
could have gone with an R word.
I'm just saying there's a 4-letter R word that's similar to a 4-letter F word that has a lot more yikesy connotations.
Damn it, I should have gone for that. Oh, that would have been so much funnier. Kevin's thinking of the good jokes.
I mean, see that's the thing. Yeah, no. Joe wins fair and square. Yeah, we'll close it with Arthur here. Yeah, bend the knee. Joe wins fair and square. See, that's the thing. That they can complain. I'm sure some of them will try to rationalize it as this was just that the DNC rigged it and colluded or whatever. But yeah, Biden won fair and square.
It's fair to predict that, and we could check these tomorrow, and we'll both be on Twitter if anyone wants to see our further reactions. I think it's pretty safe to say that Bernie's going to take North Dakota, even though it hasn't been called yet, just because he has enough of a lead that I see it happening. And he's at 49% anyway. But
yeah.
Washington is a different story, and it might take a while for that to come in. I wouldn't be surprised to see Biden take Washington, though, because Bernie should have done much better than what has been shown, and the fact that he didn't tells you a lot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. As the votes go on later, it's always the momentum is that Biden tends to get the lead because the early votes that are cast were counted at a time when Biden didn't have as much momentum as he has now. And the people that voted today, a lot of them would have voted for Biden. That's why California switched so much, because the early votes were from when Biden was in 5th, and the votes cast on that day were from when he was in 1st. So, but Reese has lost the connection there again. We will wait for him to return, and then we'll just wrap it up quickly. We have Anthony here. Anthony Avis Dubison says Bernie should split from the Dems and take the socialists with him. That way they can form a socialist party. And yeah, that would be wonderful. Bernie's not even a Democrat. He only just registered to be a Dem within like 2 months of when the primaries start each cycle, so that he can leech off Democratic voters. But he, at the end of the day, he's like basically Democratic Socialist of America. He's not a Democrat. So
I would be curious to see if that has any effect on splitting the vote, because third parties don't usually have any significant impact. They have in the past, but not too recently. But and the thing is, I really just don't think Bernie's going to run again after this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's too old, and he's not going to do it. And the the Democratic Socialists are scrambling for a new hero, and they're desperate when they're trying to push for AOC, someone who's not even old enough to run.
Yeah, AOC. She can't even run. So maybe Kremlin Kyle. I know he's in his 30s, but
yeah, I don't think he's old enough. But he potentially would be by the time of the next election. But I mean, think if they push him, think about how much dirt you have on that guy. I mean, like, think of how many just terrible clips you could play of this guy downplaying Hezbollah. Just it would be, now granted there would be a cringe section of voters who would like that for whatever reason. But
the tweets, he got shut down. People had to reject endorsements because they pulled up one of his tweets, for example, was just him out of nowhere. He wasn't even replying to anybody. It was just him in the middle of the night. And he said, "Thanks, F word."
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know.
Pretty funny.
That had to have been a drunk tweet. Like
almost certainly. And I mean, and Arthur notes here for the record, of course, that we're talking about my girlfriend when you say AOC, because of course there is a guy on here who's making videos now that are focused on how, like, I am a confirmed partner of AOC, and he has other allegations, and he's kind of a nut job. He already got suspended on Twitter because he was posting slanderous material. He's a lying, slandering piece of crap. But that's right. That's the meme now. That's the meme now, is that I'm dating AOC, because of course that, like, okay. I mean, I guess to these people, I guess they think she's hot. So, like, is that even really an insult? Like, I'm personally not attracted to AOC, but she's conventionally attractive for sure. How is that an insult anyway? Like, I mean, I don't agree with her. Like, obviously, it's such a dumb meme. Such a dumb meme.
Honestly, it might be my favorite conspiracy theory that Kevin is part of AOC's harem.
there are a lot that are out there. I mean, one of the ones going around right now is that well, there's a few different ones. There's the whole Nazi thing. There's the Soros ties, like the allegations that I'm receiving money from George Soros. Like, look at my set. Does it look like I'm getting money from George Soros? Go to Patreon and change that. Like,
I don't know. Those books could have all been pretty expensive.
The books, sure, but look at the lighting. Like, look at the filming equipment I use. I'm not obviously I don't have the same type of setup.
I don't know. I mean, that could just be an excuse, that it could look intentionally low budget to hide the real big budget that's pulling
crap.
strings.
I'm gonna have to kick him off the air. Crap, he's giving up the gig. He's giving up the gig. He's exposing the AstroTurf. We can't have that, Reese. We can't have that, Reese. The AstroTurfers, they're not gonna like that. They're gonna call me up after this and be like, "What?"
I'm just saying, if we move that bookshelf, there's probably like a Ferrari back there.
Yeah, here in my garage.
Yeah,
got the new Lamborghini. You guys know that meme? You guys know that meme that used to run on every YouTube video? Here in my garage. But you know what I like more than Lamborghinis?
Knowledge.
I like to read.
Getting knowledge.
Dude, that's such a meme. Oh man, that's such a meme.
What's that?
Another meme.
Tai Lopez, is that guy's name?
Yeah, he does other stuff too. He's kind of like a grifty dude, to my knowledge.
He is a complete scam artist, but he is really funny.
He's funny. I find a lot of the scams and stuff kind of funny. I mean, just on that point to note, like, I mean, I have to bring this up because it's something, we're gonna wrap up the stream pretty shortly, but I often talk about, economics, personal finance and stuff. And so I will often see in recommendations on Twitter or on Facebook, there will be all of these basically predatory lenders that come up as sponsor. And then I will read through the comments when they're like, they'll have stuff like, one of them is Captain Cash, I believe it is. And it's this guy and he's like saluting you. And it's like, it's like, need money, no problem. And it's like, get up to $15,000. So I read through the comments and I'm like, let's just see, does anybody take these guys seriously? Because it's an obvious scam. And then I look through, I mean, even though it's a legitimate operation, and you're like, somebody asked in there, they're like, what's the interest rate on this? Because of course that's the elephant in the room, but it turns out, no, it's not the elephant in the room. The interest rate is actually pretty reasonable. Their interest rate is like 20% or something, which is kind of like standard credit card rate. But then they're like, but please note that for a $500 loan, there's a $268 brokerage fee plus the 20% interest. And I look at that and I'm like, my brokerage fee, that's a new meme. That's a new meme. Some of my buddies I was talking to, I'm like, that's a meme. Like, that's the elephant in the room. Like, okay, so you're gonna issue a loan for 4 months that's $500, and you got a $268 brokerage fee, and but it's a low interest rate. Like, no, some of the scams out there, they're meme worthy. I feel like I have my Liberal Hawk meme page, but I feel like I should do a scam meme page just exposing all the bullshit too. So
it could be the alternative bad econ takes.
Yeah, well, bad econ takes exposed me when he basically highlighted in red markup when I said neoliberalism is socialism with modern market terminology and marketing and stuff. Which, if you look at Globe Twitter, that's exactly what it turned out to be. And this is back in January, and they all poured over me, and they're like, "Look at this guy! Look at this guy! How cringe! Hashtag cringe Castly." And now we have some of the heads of that movement either blocking me, as neoliberal did, who's got 50,000 subscribers, or in the case of like Liz, ironically edgy, she says, well, yeah, Globe, like she basically says, let's make the Globe Rose Twitter alliance real. So it's like, to own me, basically. It's funny because, like, for those of you wondering, I have about 400 subscribers or followers on Twitter, but coming up on 500. Some of these people have like tens of thousands, and they can't stand me. I'm like, I live rent free in their heads. So they're
it is a fairly unhealthy obsession, for sure.
They've actually gone to the level of coming to people who follow me, some of my close friends and associates, and saying, you better unfollow Kevin or I'm gonna unfollow you. How cringe.
I don't know if you mentioned it, and I'll let you go to sleep soon. This will be the last thing. But I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, but we had those accounts we suspected were neoliberal accounts, and they
flooded us.
They made a Kevin Castly fan Discord.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah,
they were literally harassing me, and I'm sure they were harassing other people. Like, hey, tell Kevin that we made, we're his biggest fans. We made this Discord for him, and this like
they all have 8 followers, and were created this month. Like,
yeah, very very clearly, it was not a friendly Discord.
They're using my profile picture. They've copied my bio. So there are a bunch of accounts that look like mine going around. I'm at Kevin Castly. A lot of these guys are at like Come Low, for example, that kind of stuff. They're neoliberals. I at first was kind of unsure if they were the dirtbag leftists or if they were the neoliberals, though it should be noted they're merging together pretty rapidly at this rate. But no, even a lot of like the hardcore lefties are more inspired than this level of cringe. They're trying to, and we had a couple sort of suspicions recently as well that I can get into off the stream later, of course. But I've come to the conclusion now, based off of several people coming to me with this, that the neoliberals of Twitter are trying to infiltrate the gang chat, and they're trying to get dirt and personal information on us. I'm not sure if they're attempting a doxing or something. It should be noted for the record here, I actually blocked somebody who I was friendly with because he threatened to dox the neoliberals, even though I disagree with the neoliberals. I'm against doxing on all sides. But to my knowledge, I've had credible information now that they're trying to get in and they're trying to infiltrate and make themselves look legitimate and come into our circles. And I should put this out there. We're vigilant. We're not idiots. We're not the kind of people that give money to Liz's Patreon. We have better things to do. We're on to this. So,
Yeah, if those accounts that were harassing us are members of the same community, then they certainly have a lot of time on their hands, and they're aware of who you speak to, like me. So if anyone else has been harassed, maybe let us know in private, and we will try to keep an eye on accounts like that. Because
we're staying vigilant right now, because there's been some suspicious activity as of late that beyond just this that has led me to the conclusion that ever since January, essentially, these people have had it out against me, and they're trying to infiltrate themselves, and it's the sort of thing that, sure, they're not going to be able to get too much. Obviously, they what are they going to do against me? Everybody already knows who I am, where I went to school, where I live, all that stuff. That's the public record. But it is the fellow Hawk associates that I worry about, because not everybody wants to be public. Not everybody feels comfortable being public. Some people don't want to do this as a profession, for example. So that's their prerogative. And these
some people live in precarious situations anyway. Some people who are associated with the movement are ex-Muslims. They might live in a dangerous community where they really can't be outed. And it's just such stupid drama, and I would really hate for the neoliberal community to escalate it to something that personal, because that reflects so horribly on them, especially yes, because you've attempted to stop them from getting doxxed. So
I literally blocked the dude. I told him, I'm like, dude, I cannot be party to this. I told him, I'm like, look, I did not unfollow. Like, I unfollowed you based on good counsel I received from my friends. He thought I was pressured by the neolibs, and he's like, look, I'll dox them, dude. I'm gonna do something extra legal here. And I'm like, dude, don't go down that route. You don't want to do that. And yet the neolibs, to them, I'm an evil neocon warmonger imperialist, and they see me as basically as much an opponent. I mean, that now to those that are watching this that might not be present on Twitter, there's been a very big shift lately in the last few years, especially, but more recently, from neoliberals as being, more economically right wing to being basically almost Bernie or Warren stands. Essentially, it's super cringe. So, but Reese is just disconnected again. We're gonna wrap this up. We basically said everything that needs to be said. Obviously, Biden won big. And it was a good night. So thank you to everybody for staying with us, watching this stream. Appreciate it. And yeah, have a good night to everybody. Peace.